One guy did.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the El Cajon City Council meeting. The meeting is now called to order, and I'd like to ask our city clerk to please call the roll.
All council members are present.
Would you all stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance and then remain standing for a brief moment of silence afterwards?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The city clerk posted orders of adjournment of the June 13th, 2023, and the agenda of the June 27th, 2023 meeting in accordance with state law, City Council, and Housing Authority policy. We have one presentation on today's agenda, accommodation for A.M. Ortega. Will the representatives from A.M. Ortega please come up, and from ECTLC?
Maybe they're all working.
Where? Here? Where? Oh. Thank you. Hello, come on up. Who's going to speak first?
You have to speak?
Mr. Ortega. Hey, you're the. Listen, before you start, let me say a little bit about you. East County Transitional Living Center is a wonderful homeless transitional housing center here in El Cajon. It's one of the most effective in the county. A lot of people think it should be a model for the entire state and maybe the nation. And Mr. Ortega has been kind enough to partner with ECTLC to bring nine gentlemen?
Yes, 9.
9 people into his business as apprentices and teach them how to do his business, which is underground construction. And they're now in the process of that. They've been doing it for about a month now?
Yes, it was a month of training, and they had been on board for just about 3 weeks.
Tell me how it's going.
It's going fantastic. Actually, it feels funny talking this way or that way, but it all started off with a thought and a dream. We wanted to. My wife and I, we built a company. We always wanted to have a training center. We started back in 1974 with an old pickup truck and an old beat-up backhoe, and then grew the company. Our peak was at 420, and now we're back down around 300. But you want to give back to your community and time in your life when you can do it, or you can't do it. And we have such a huge issues going on in all of our cities, and El Cajon's not excluded at all. But either, one, you can complain about it, or two, you can be part of the solution. And we want to be part of the solution. My team right here, and Ronnie, he's the star of our program. He really is. We wanted to hire a couple people on board and reach out to our community of contractor friends. And they all agreed that they would at least interview and possibly even hire. Well, after all of our supervisors went out to the facility, we have a little training center around here in El Cajon. After they went out there, I want those 2 guys. I want that guy. Next thing you know, all 9 guys are spoken for, and we had nobody to push out to the community. So this is pretty good just within our own little group. So this is our pilot program, and we're hoping to do this again and again and again. And if we can do it as a small little contractor here in El Cajon, maybe it can be contagious and other companies can do the same thing, create a model out of it. And like Ronnie, he's our star. I mean, he got picked up. He's right now in dispatch. We do a lot of work for SDG&E. So all the dispatching, whether it's a porta potty or an excavator or whatever's needed, they call us to get things out to them. So Ronnie hasn't stressed out yet. Every day is a challenge. And when just one phone call, after answered phones all day long, and I want something yesterday. That's what he's dealing with right now. And then Mark Greening's been with me. Actually, Mark Green got me on board with SDG&E years ago. He then retired and came on board with us. So I go, Mark, we're trying to put this thing together. I need support. So Mark and Lexi and Joanne and and Ellen, so it's been a team effort. It really has. And the day we had our graduation, I was telling all the guys, I go, you know what, you guys think you're getting something out of this? You are, but we're getting more out of it than you are. We really, truly are. And as the day started off, I didn't realize how pumped up Joanne made that whole operation, how it turned out. It was fantastic. And the guys, I've never seen bigger grins on anyone's face, but they all had grins from one ear to the other. And it's been good. Hopefully we can do the same thing, like I said, again. And hopefully others can follow us. And thank you very much.
When will their training be over?
Their training, the first 4 weeks were out at our training center, and that's been completed. And that gives everybody an idea. I don't care if you came from transitional living or you came from the union hall, you have to go through our training program. Then after that, we put you out in the field so they have a good understanding what we're all about as a company. The safety, the quality of work that we're looking for, the way we do things maybe a little bit different than other companies, not 100% different, but we do things a little bit differently. We don't want them to go out in the field to get trained. So wherever you come from, you have to go through our training center first. So their basic training is completed, but now, like you get a driver's license, now you have your driver's license. That doesn't mean you're a driver. That means you can drive legally on the road. So all of our men, they've been through the training program. Now they can get out in the field. They'll start learning more each day that they're out there. They can take, and if they want to be a professional laborer, if they want to be a pipe fitter, a fuser, if they want to do the electrical side, we have a design group. We have an electrical side. We have low pressure and high pressure gas main. We have grading, paving, fencing. Did I leave anything out?
No, you got it all.
All right. So they have opportunities. So anyhow, appreciate the recognition. I appreciate them even more, all of them. Including Ronnie. He's our superstar. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Before you go away, let me read just the end part of this proclamation. Now, therefore, I, Bill Wells, Mayor of the City of El Cajon, together with the City Council, proudly acknowledge and commend A.M. Ortega Construction Incorporated for their dedication to creating employment opportunities and equipping individuals with the necessary skills and training for a successful future. We are honored to collaborate with A.M. Ortega Construction Incorporated and the East County Transitional Living Center to address homelessness effectively within the City of El Cajon. Signed this 27th day of June, 2023. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Sure.
For the public, I want to just say one more thing. The generosity that Mr. Ortega is displaying cannot be understated, and the vision that you have cannot be understated. Partnering up with ECTLC and the culture you have created there under Pastor Harold Brown and you, Ivan, and leadership over there is the perfect partnership to give people vision for their life, new vision for their life, a second chance on their life. And donating your own money to train these men to have a second chance at life is exactly what this community needs to bring ourselves out of this homeless crisis. And what I said at the, it seemed like a party that we had for the graduation, I guess is what it was, but it was outstanding. At the graduation was a lot of the models that we see around homelessness in California are give a man a fish model, and they're only being fed for a day. And Mr. Ortega, the entire team, ECTLC, is teaching men how to fish so they can provide for themselves, and then therefore they can go and pass those skills along down the road. And so I just really want to tip my hat, because I don't know of any other construction company, business, organization like this team right here. So thank you very much on behalf of the citizens, the city, the staff, for the leadership you're showing in East County. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Agenda changes. Staff, do you have any agenda changes?
No, sir. We have no changes to the agenda.
Council members? We're now at consent items. Consent items are routine matters enacted by one motion according to the recommendation listed below. With the concurrence of the City Council, a council member or person in attendance may request discussion of a consent item at this time. Council members, do you wish to pull any of the consent items? Staff?
No, sir.
Angela, do we have any speaker cards for consent?
We have no card, sir.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the consent items. Please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
We're now at public comment. At this time, any person may address a matter within the jurisdiction of the City Council Housing Authority, successor agency to the El Cajon Redevelopment Agency that is not on the agenda. Comments relating to items on today's agenda are to be taken at the time that the item is heard. State law prohibits discussion or action on items not on the agenda. However, City Council and Housing Authority members may briefly respond to statements or questions. An item may be placed on a future agenda. Angela, do we have any speaker cards for public comment?
We have no card, sir.
Okay. There are no written communications on today's agenda. There are no public hearings on today's agenda. We have 5 administrative reports on today's agenda. Item 10 is a report on Parkway Plaza, and I'd like to ask our city manager to please introduce this item.
Thank you, Mr. Wells, and members of the City Council. If we can get my presentation up. Thank you. As you recall, as you know, Parkway Plaza is an important economic engine for the city of El Cajon and has been a priority for the city council. In fact, it's been a topic of your city council action plan for the last several years. This year is no different. One of the goals as part of the council action plan was to secure a group of students from San Diego State to provide some additional analysis and then sort of help us understand what some possibilities are. And so the purpose of today's meeting is really to provide a brief summary about a capstone project that 4 San Diego State students performed. And I'm going to I'll explain what I'll focus on theirs. But I wanted to use that as an opportunity to provide some opportunities or show some vision of what could occur at Parkway Plaza, and then get some ideas from the City Council and talk about some potential next steps of how to help facilitate revitalization of the mall. I think it's really important that Council knows this, but I don't always know if the public recognizes this, that the City of El Cajon has 0 ownership at Parkway Plaza, meaning we have no ability to impose your wishes, your vision on that facility. We'll talk about what you do have later on, but I think it's important to recognize that you don't own businesses there. You can't force a business to open or close. You can't force development to happen. And in fact, I saw one Facebook post that says, please don't close Parkway Plaza. Well, even if the City Council wanted to close Parkway Plaza, you have no ability to close Parkway Plaza. So having said that, as a foundation, let me launch into the capstone project. So these 4 graduate students in the public administration program researched Parkway Plaza. They looked at what's working, what could be better. They looked at other examples in other cities of what they're doing and came up with this report. It's a very comprehensive report. They were actually voted by the evaluating professors as the capstone project of the year of all the different capstones that we're focused on. A lot of that has to do with the great interaction that they had with city staff, but also Daisy Molina, who's here from Parkway Plaza, and she gave them a lot of time and effort and energy. So really appreciate that. One of the things that I thought was the most valuable from the capstone project was an immense amount of polling and survey taking that they did, which I'll kind of focus the majority of the capstone portion of the presentation on the data that they came up with. first of all, I think it's important to recognize that Parkway Plaza is a little bit unique in that it's not owned by one entity. Star West is the legal entity that owns the majority of Parkway Plaza. Sage, or it was Seritage, it's transferring over to Sage Investment Co. They are the area that used to own the Sears and the parking lot all the way to the corner of Fletcher Parkway and Johnson Avenue. Fletcher Parkway Group owns the former Macy's building, including the parking lot up to Fletcher Parkway and around the former Macy's site. What's interesting is JCPenney and Walmart have long-term leases with Starwood. So Starwood owns the land clearly underneath, and there's some it's confusing about who owns what, but it's safe to say that there are more than one entity that we would have to deal with in helping to cast a vision of what could occur there. So from a land use perspective, it's important to recognize that this whole area is governed by a specific plan. It regulates or governs the full 80-acre site. One of the things that the specific plan says that if retail is reduced, that it actually requires city council action. So if the mall were to, let's say, lop off a half of it and turn it into housing, they could not do that on their own. That would require an amendment to the specific plan. So the city council has a lot of control in keeping what is there now, but not a lot of control of modifying what could be in the future. It's zoned, just so you know, from a regional commercial. It's zoned regional commercial. But what's most important is that the city council in 2018 put this overlay zone over the existing specific plan and the zoning, which allows 40 units per acre to be constructed by right, meaning it doesn't have to go to planning commission, doesn't have to go to the city council. But even more importantly, the city council paid for the environmental work, or the EIR, so all that work is done ahead of time. That's one of the biggest risks that any developer takes is the environmental work up front. The city council has already taken on that risk because you've already done all of that work. So let's talk about some of the survey data that they collected. So they really wanted to get an understanding of the shopper's profile of those that attend Parkway Plaza. They conducted online surveys. They collected over 3,000 surveys. Phenomenal. They offered it in 3 languages: English, Spanish, and Arabic. And about 60% of those that participated in the survey are El Cajon residents. So that means 40% of those they surveyed had a connection with Parkway Plaza and decided to take the survey. From an age distribution, over 25% are between the ages of 40 and 49, with 20% as the second largest group between 30 and 39. So you can see almost half of those surveyed are between the ages of 30 and 50 years old. One of the other questions that was asked was about what the frequency of attending other malls. Parkway Plaza was the number one mall that those that took the survey responded to, followed by Grossmont and then Fashion Valley. It's clear that there is a correlation between proximity to the mall and attendance of the mall. They also asked about income or household income. As you can see, a large percentage, 46%, almost half of those that took the survey have a household income of $100,000 or more. And then the last question that I will kind of focus on in detail has to do with what establishments were visited. As you can see, Walmart by far is the most visited store at Parkway Plaza. And then Regal, Dick's Sporting Goods, Home Goods, JCPenney is about tied for second. And then it drops off from there. They also asked about their overall satisfaction with the mall. And those, the 3,000 plus that took the survey, said that about 51% of them are not satisfied with the mall. Now, that can mean a lot of things. And we'll dive into some of the things that they would like to see more of. I apologize for the formatting. Every time it is on a new system, it changes the formatting. But you can see from this slide, answering the question, what would bring you to Parkway Plaza more often? Clearly, more retail, more dining. Everything else is clearly secondary, but those are the drivers of what would bring people to Parkway Plaza. But you can see family activities, places for walking, outdoor space, kids' play areas, and some transit options were included as part of that list. So a couple of key factors that staff identified. One, I think that there's a desire for more community events at the mall. And it's a great property. And in fact, as part of National Night Out, the police event, it was hosted at Parkway Plaza last year. It's going to be hosted there again this year. Really, it's going to be a bigger event than before. So we think there's a lot of value in starting to think about, are there opportunities to have community events at that facility? There was, throughout the survey, this perception of a lack of safety came up over and over again. So, and some of it was founded and some of it's not founded. You've heard the mantra that Parkway Plaza is the human trafficking capital of the world. There's zero truth to that allegation. And the chief can talk more about that if there's a question from the council. But there's a perception that really does need to be worked on. And there was a little bit of discussion about connecting more with the trolley station, the Arnell station, and creating a better or a safer pedestrian experience from that station to the mall. So the students, based on their surveys and their findings, they came up with a series of recommendations, and they were broken into phases 0 through 5. I'm gonna really lump a couple of them together and just have sort of 3 phases of recommendations that they came up with. And these are their recommendations, not necessarily staff's recommendation. But they did say that there was a need for some additional assessment of the mall, what's working, what's not working, what are the vulnerabilities, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, what are the opportunities. And to really start engaging the community on this idea of safety perception and having more of a community dialogue around that area. I think there's some value in that. Phase 2 had to do more about bringing activities to the mall, whether it be city events, farmers markets, other things like that. They also talked about developing an opportunity, a more comprehensive parking plan to maximize efficiencies. The reality is that mall, from a zoning perspective, is overparked by, I believe, about 1,000 spaces. So there are some opportunities for efficiencies. Although it's interesting, I do see in a lot of Facebook posts, where are people going to park? But as I drive by, there are seas of parking lots and parking structures, a lot of them which are leased for other purposes. So there's plenty of parking opportunities there. There was also this idea of encouraging pets or creating a mall that's a little bit more pet friendly. And they really pointed to Fashion Valley. Having gone to Fashion Valley and loving my pet, I recognize that Fashion Valley, an outdoor mall, is a lot different, or UTC is a lot different than in all indoor Parkway Plaza. So I don't know if staff would recommend that, and plus we have no ability to require them or force them to do that. But that was something they thought that the mall ownership or management should think about at some point. The last sort of sets of recommendations is that the city could help the existing property owners create this vision of what would bring more people to Parkway Plaza, kind of focusing on the data that they collected, focusing on retail and food establishments. And staff will come back and talk about that because I think we do have some suggestions and are looking for some city council feedback in that area. And also thinking about some incentives to encourage some additional mixed-use development at the mall. And we'll kind of talk about what that really means at the end of the day. So with that, before I kind of talk about vision or opportunities, does council have any questions about the capstone project? I didn't have a chance to attend their actual presentation. Mr. Shute did, so between him and I, we could probably answer any questions that you may have specifically about their project. Any questions from the council?
Just real quick, one of the questions I'm sure that the public would bring up, we have a little over 100,000 people in the city. They took a survey of 3,000 people. Is that a good percentage, a 3%?
Yes and no. I mean, statistically, it's a great survey, but it wasn't randomly, right? I mean, this was self-selected. When you do an online survey, you are choosing to take it.
Okay.
There's a reason why you were directed to take it. So it's going to skew the data all the time. And I think that's important. It is also important to recognize that this is a subgroup. But 3,000 surveys in a city of 100,000, if it were a randomized survey, that is well above statistically accurate.
Okay, thank you.
One more question about the respondents. Were they all El Cajon residents, or were they just East County? Or
Well, 60% were actual El Cajon residents.
Okay.
The rest had some sort of a connection to Parkway Plaza,
Okay.
where something on social media triggered them to want to go
okay,
there.
thank you.
Okay. If there's no more questions, I'll move on. Okay, so we wanted to sort of set the stage or lay the foundation of some of the opportunities that could occur at Parkway Plaza. And I think it's important to recognize that there's really 5 things when you're looking at a mall of what to do. One is to do nothing and just sort of let the market figure out what it's going to do. You can see across the United States that the concept of a large regional mall are starting to change. And unless there's an evolution at some point, there's a pretty significant cost of no action. The other concept, which isn't kind of shown here, is just a big rehab of the mall and just put a lot of money into reinvesting into new fixtures and new lighting and new flooring, all that. At some point, is that throwing good money at bad, right? I don't know that. I'm not in the mall business. That would be something that the ownership group could talk about. The 3 things that I wanted to focus on is areas that I'm seeing in reading the literature where the trends are going. One is to identify opportunities for development along the hinterlands or the outside of the mall. In other words, the large expanses of parking lots. The other is to look at the mall and really look at what is the demand for commercial space. And if there's 100,000 square feet of space and there's only 70,000 square feet of demand for commercial space, what do you do with that other 30,000 square feet? And there's a lot of options, a lot of opportunities to do things with that. So that's sort of the others. You kind of keep the mall as it is, but you start thinking about reuses or repurposing portions of an existing facility. The third is you think about just scrapping the whole thing and starting over, right? So those are kind of the 3 extremes from the do nothing to completely scrap the whole thing. So, having said that, I'm gonna share 3 different malls with you from around North America. The first is going to start in British Columbia, a suburb just east of Vancouver. This mall was built in 1963. You can see that Sears building. Oh, you can't see that. Now you can see that Sears building. It looks very similar, right? Sears had a very standard look. Looked very similar to Parkway Plaza Sears for a while. But you can tell that this mall, what it looked like in 1963. And guess what? By 2014, it hadn't changed much. So large mall, massive parking lot. Looks like there's some opportunities for some pad development. In fact, there's the beginning of some pad development and that little corner piece. What's also interesting about this is you can see that to the near the bottom, that long white rectangular structure. That's actually a light rail station. So light rail goes right up to the parking lot of the mall. You still have to walk all the way through the parking lot, but there was a light rail connecting to that. And I also like you to sort of draw your attention to what's around the mall. You can see to, we'll call that the north of the mall. You can see clearly pretty standard single-family residential. And then you can see some low-rise or low-density development to the areas near the transit center and to the west of the mall. Again, this is what it looked like in 2014. Pretty standard. London Drugs, we don't have a London Drugs, but it's similar to a large drugstore, Walmart-y kind of a store, was the anchor there. They created a vision. They just put on ideas on a paper and develop this vision. This is not a drawing. This is actually a Google Earth image of what exists today. That is there. This was then. You can see that little corner piece. This is there now. That mall is still there in the backdrop. I looked at it. It has all the standard stores that any other mall would have. Has an Adidas store, has an H&M, has Bed Bath & Beyond, has all the stores that we would typically see at malls. But now you have a large food entertainment area in front of the mall, that outdoor plaza area, and you have two very large residential towers. By the way, staff would never recommend towers that large in El Cajon, but it just shows you the opportunity. The other thing that I wanted to point out, looking at the neighboring properties, you can see the properties just sort of to the south haven't changed much, but you can see some new development occurring to the southwest of the mall property, and the single-family residential continues to remain. So that kind of just shares with you an opportunity for a pretty significant redevelopment of a mall that looks very similar to our property. Now we'll go a little south to Austin, Texas, to Highland Mall. This mall was built in 2015. Also, you can see, picture was taken in 2015. It was built in the 70s. You can see that it is a sea of parking lot. They had a need for the Austin Community College, and so the community college took over the entire mall. That used to be the entrance to JCPenney. It's now the entrance to the community college. And then around it, you can see they're starting to develop out pads with residential development that looks like that, with mixed use on the bottom floor. This is kind of an aerial map that kind of shows the uses. The blue is the existing mall in the expansion of the community college, with the orange or that yellow residential units, and then there's office commercial in that peach color. So kind of taking out a property and maximizing the density and putting all the parking structures, as you can see here. I mean, this is called a Texas wrap for a reason. It's in Texas, where you build a parking structure, and then you wrap it with residential or with retail or commercial. So again, that's the mall property, taking an aerial view of that today. So you can see the mall property still exists, and then there's new development in and around the property where the parking lot was. And you can even see to the we'll call that the west side, the far left side, you can still see that there's some new development still being built out. Okay, last property we'll go to is a mall in, there was now. Okay, last mall is the Northgate Mall in Seattle, Washington. This was built in the 1950s, but had a really massive renovation in the 1970s, about the same time arm of that Parkway Plaza was developed. Looks very similar to ours. Had a Dillard's, had a Macy's, had a lot of the stores, had a Nordstrom, had a lot of the stores that typical malls have. This is not developed, but they have a plan. It's a 20-year plan. That's what it looks like now. This is their build-out plan for over a 20-year period. It's going to have housing. It's going to have new retail, new office space. There's going to be a hotel there, and there'll be a headquarters for the Seattle's NHL team, the Kraken. So that will be their headquarters, along with a hockey rink, practice rink there. So a lot is occurring on this property that used to look like this, but now eventually over a 20-year period will look like this. So you can see that it's not just an overnight thing. There's no magic wand. There's a lot of investment. There's a lot of visioning, and there's time for these things to occur. So as I said at the beginning, the city has no ownership, has no ability to impose its rule or its wishes, but there are some things that we can do. One, we can remove the risk. We also can facilitate vision. and we can bring parties together to have a broader discussion. And that, frankly, has probably been a challenge in the past of having the parties come together for that broader discussion. So I wanted to just share really quickly these are, no architect was involved, very little time was spent, sort of my vision of the potential of what could occur, thinking back on these three models of using the parking lot, thinking about repurposing a portion of the mall. There is the mall property, as you well know from the aerial. So here would be the idea of developing out the surface parking lots, keeping the mall as it is. The blue areas would be residential, for the most part residential development. The orange would be additional retail, probably more food type of establishments, and the green would be parks and green space that you could add to be amenities for those that live there. Just really quick and dirty drawing with boxes on a PowerPoint. Or thinking about sort of more of a repurposing idea, you continue to utilize some of the space in the parking lots, but then you take the eastern third of the mall where the Macy's, former Macy's was, the JCPenney's in that area, and you convert that into something else, whether it be housing or other purposes. You have a pretty grandiose park that would connect that area with the existing mall. You keep the movie theater, you keep some of the other stores on the other side. So that's kind of another concept that could be thought through. And then the last is thinking about just a whole transformation and something brand new there. I guess, San Diego does have a new MLS team, so maybe we need an MLS headquarters. So anyway. So let's talk about what are some of the things that we can do to support this redevelopment. One is the visioning. I think this is the very beginning of that discussion about the vision of what could occur there. And I'll come back and talk about maybe how we can take a bigger role in that. The next is the land use. Check. You've already done that. The council has already established the specific plan. You already have done the EIR work that allows the residential to occur. You've already done the zoning and general plan amendments. I think once a vision were to be established and that the council liked that vision and the owners liked that vision, then it would be a matter of how do we create incentives or requirements of what you want to see at the mall or the mall property to make that actually happen. And then it's really creating some legal opportunities where you bring them together legally with some development formation agreements that would allow that project to be developed. I think it's also important to recognize that we have an opportunity to work on funding sources through sharing our tax increment, our property tax increment. There's some ways to help finance some of the infrastructure, so we can think about that from a strategic perspective of how the city can finance it and have a win-win scenario, and then really what those infrastructures are. So let's talk about next steps. One, I think we do need to have some meetings with the ownership group. Daisy has informed me that there is an ownership group coming in August, and I've been invited, right, to attend. Is that still on? Maybe? Okay, we're going to have a call first. So anyway, there's some headway moving in meeting with those that are decision makers. I think in order to remove more risk and to help understand the vision, we've got to get beyond city managers, PowerPoint, little squares, and we've got to get an architect engaged and with an economist and actually identify what would the cost be to build some of this stuff, what would be the revenue streams to do that, and does any of this make any financial sense at all, right? Because without that, it's just pie in the sky. So staff would actually recommend that the city council initially allocate $250,000 for us to start engaging with some consulting firms with an understanding that it will probably get as much as $500,000 to really understand what that plan and what that vision could look like in reality, and then we can pitch that to the ownership groups of those that own the mall. I think once that's developed, then we would come back with some incentives. We still think there's some baby step things that we can do there. National Night Out, some other opportunities. I think we're going to, at a staff level, be thinking about those types of opportunities to engage more people. I've talked to Daisy about potentially city running a pickleball program in one of the empty spaces there. Love to see that moving forward. And lastly, I think it's important that at the staff level and the city council level that we hold the line. Currently, we have not allowed drive-throughs for the most part on Fletcher and Johnson. And I got to tell you, there's a demand for a drive-through every other day. And I think it's really important that we hold the line on that, because once a drive-through goes in, the ability to redevelop that space will be really difficult to do. So anyways, having said that, I think there's some value of holding that line and us making a commitment that we'll do that. So with that, if we can help remove that risk and facilitate that vision, I think that's sort of the area that we can help in facilitating a rebirth of Parkway Plaza at some point. So with that, I'm looking for any council thoughts, any discussion, any feedback that you think would be helpful to the staff, and then your thoughts on allocating some funding for architectural services.
Thank you. That was a good presentation. I think we need to make sure that one thought that I have, especially out here in East County, we need to maintain some semblance of refuge from the heat. As the summer comes up, more and more of our senior citizens are going to need a place to go. I know my neighbors walk in the mall in the mornings, and they need that cool space to be able to get out. I know a lot of families like to come to the mall to escape the heat. So if one thing we do need to keep the integrity is at least providing indoor shopping experience, whatever it is, to give us some refuge from the heat, because the libraries can only hold so much. And with the cost of living going up all the time, this is something that's really needed. I like the ideas, and I would be curious to see what an architect would come up with. I thought British Columbia had a great-looking mall there that was pretty space-age looking and pretty forward. It'd be quite a change for El Cajon to have something that new and spacey looking, but I'm willing to entertain the idea of putting some money out for an architect.
Are the bondholders, do they still own part of that property, or have they sold it, or are they in the process of selling? Do we know?
I don't know. I just took the cue from the mall manager, and she seemed to nod her head that they still own it, and there's probably not an interest in selling anytime soon.
Okay, thank you. The mall is one of our largest sales tax contributors. I mean, the mall funds police, fire, paramedics, all the things that keep this city running. So I think it's of vital importance that we make sure that it's a viable mall. So I'm in favor of this $250,000. That's a drop in a bucket compared to the kind of revenue the mall provides this city.
Thank you, Graham. I want to commend you and the staff for enlisting the help, especially the free help of our students at San Diego State. The creativity there was fantastic to get this conversation rolling. Malls are dying across America, and redeveloping them so people going to these malls have an experience, or it's a destination. That's what really malls are shifting to all across the United States. It's the Amazon effect. People aren't going to shops anymore. They're just ordering things on Amazon, and then COVID sped that up with the decline of businesses being in a physical location. And so to re-envision the mall, I think, is a priority. To Councilman Kendrick's point, is that it's one of the biggest assets that we have at the city with regard to a property. I know for a fact that downtown San Diego, East Village, that was not something that happened passively. It was active communication and coordination between private sector, developers, and government to make sure that downtown was a place that you actually wanted to go to as a destination. I heard one of the developers say, if you wanted to go downtown, the only reason you went was to go get drugs and to go to court. That was the only reason you went downtown. So they changed that perception through a concerted effort. And I would be in support of bringing developer, architect, let's present our asset to, the country, the world, really, to get the investment that we need to redevelop this site in some way, shape, or form, or redo it. Grossmont Mall was just bought. They're going to redevelop theirs. Horton Plaza, they completely redid theirs. I took a tour of it, and they did the start over thing. They used some of the infrastructure, but they're doing the whole start over method. So there are organizations and funding sources and companies that are willing to come in and do all this. And to be honest, I mean, it doesn't really bother me that the respondents were from El Cajon. People in East County cross-pollinate. People from Santee go to El Cajon. La Mesa goes to Santee. So we're not just talking about El Cajon residents. People, if this is going to be redeveloped, people from all over East County would use that, use the mall. So with that, yeah, I would be 100% in favor of 250 to 500 to establish that vision for the mall. And, look forward to really putting staff with the tools they need to set this and work with our partners at Parkway. Thank you for being here, Daisy. Appreciate it.
I'm okay with the 250, but I would wait until you have your meeting with the mall ownership. If we're going to give something, we should ask for something. And that ask may be some kind of commitment from them. Otherwise, we have spent money perhaps on something that we don't know that they want to do. So I'm okay with the 250, but let's ask for something in return, some kind of commitment. It will be a show of good faith, but let's be careful how far we get in front of this.
Yeah, I agree. And just so you know, I mean, this would require a procurement process. So we're talking months to get even something out the door. So we'll have, hopefully, I think you're right, hopefully lots of conversations with the ownership groups. Because if there is zero interest whatsoever, I don't know what use that would be throwing good money at something bad. So I agree.
Graham, is this the group of people that put this all together, sitting over here?
All right, do we have the students here? No, they're not. They've graduated, and they're
off.
They have real jobs now, and so yeah, Brenna was a graduate student that worked on a losing capstone project, not the winning capstone project, but second place. That's what I heard. But no, we did invite them, but they all had commitments and they've graduated, so they're good.
I think we should thank Brenna anyway, since she's the only one who showed up. So thank you, Brenna. Nicely done. Okay, great. Well,
with that, I mean, we don't have the, when we come back later date with RFP stuff, we will take care of the budgetary components then. So with that, you've given us some green lights to do stuff, but we're not going to spend any money, just so you know, until that gets allocated appropriately.
let me see if there's any speaker cards on this item.
Thank you, sir. Yes, we have one speaker, and that would be Marshall Anderson.
Hello, Marshall. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members, and thank you, Mr. Mitchell, for the presentation. Marshall Anderson, I'm speaking on behalf of Sage Investco. As the new owners of the Sears building and the surrounding parking parcel at Parkway Plaza, Sage Investco appreciates the opportunity to dialogue with your planning staff and is looking forward to working closely with the city on ways to better serve the community and revitalize the mall facility. We would like the opportunity, before any formal action is taken as it relates to the property, to have continued dialogue about what makes sense for the site. As you know, and Councilmember Ortiz, you nailed it, retail and consumer needs have been changing for some time, and in the evolving mall space, A more diverse and modern set of uses is needed to help activate and improve not only customer traffic flow, but also to ensure that Parkway Plaza remains an economic catalyst and jobs creator for years to come. With that, just want to say we look forward to working with you, and thank you for the time.
Thank you very much.
No other speakers, sir.
Okay. So, Graham, you need a motion to approve the $250,000?
No, I don't think so. We'll bring that back formally for council to approve at a later date when we actually have a contractor, a consultant that we can engage with you on. So,
Sounds good. And I'm glad that you're working with the owners. I think that should work out really well. All right. Item 11 is a summary of the town hall meetings about homelessness recently held. I'll ask City Manager to please introduce this item to us.
thank you, Mr. Mayor, and again, the City Council. This will be more brief than the last one. I apologize. You have to listen to me for 2 agenda items in a row. But one of the things that we promised to do as part of the homeless town halls, the 4 that we conducted, is to provide a summary to the City Council, and so the community could hear some of the things that occurred there. As you recall, because you were there, we really covered a lot of items in the short amount of time that we spent at the town halls. We identified and explained all the different city programs that we've been running, the limitations that exist in California, some of the successes that we've had, and then we broke into small group discussions and got some ideas, and that's what I'll be sharing. The majority of my presentation will be the ideas that were fomented during those small group discussions, and then they all came back and reported back and shared their big ideas. So with that, one of the things that we really wanted to understand is, did the town hall make a difference, or was it just words? And so we did a pre and a post survey, and we asked the question about, how well is the city addressing homelessness? And I thought this was really useful. Before the meeting began, out of 10, the average response is 5.78, and by the end of the town halls, it increased to 7.06. So that's a 22% improvement. That's not bad, right? But I still think there's opportunities for improvement. And granted, this is the score of a very narrow group of people. Ms. Mitchell asked about the validity of a survey with 3,000. This is even a more, not only smaller, but a very specialized subgroup that really wanted to attend. And as the staff report indicated, I believe about almost 20% of those that attended were either there on assignment because of the organization they represent, or had attended many of them or several of them, or more than one of them. So anyways, it was a very different group of individuals than, I would say, the average public. And as I share this, I think it's important to keep that in mind, that these ideas are a bit skewed because of the self-selection involved. So one of the things that we asked during the small group discussions is, what are some things that the city's not doing or we should do more of? There was this concept of more options, more shelter options, more safe parking, camping, a day center perhaps. There was also, we heard throughout the town halls, the need for more housing, just general housing, not even affordable housing, just more housing stock. We heard some different ideas for types of housing as well, like small, kind of that post-World War II housing. We heard some requests for that. We heard a request for more outreach efforts, a broader outreach effort. We heard the need to also ban public camping and sleeping in vehicles on city streets, and then really a focus on substance abuse and mental illness. We also asked, what do we do with those that are here as a region? We're spending millions and millions and millions of dollars, and the city is spending a lot of money, yet the problem doesn't seem to get much better. And I have some personal beliefs why that's the case. I think we're probably focusing our attention on the wrong thing. But one of the things that we wanted to get out of this is those that are attending, what are they seeing? Why do they think maybe things aren't working. And some of the ideas that were developed was there's still limited shelter options throughout the county. The cost of housing continues to climb, despite this alleged recession or this slowing down of the economy. Still, house prices continue to go up. The Section 8 waiting list is years and years in some cases. Again, we're not addressing the core root problems, the issues of mental illness and drug abuse. And then just the permissive drug allowance and the permissive laws in the state of California make it difficult for us to address homelessness, at least from a law enforcement perspective, which has been the way we've addressed homelessness for years and years and years. We also asked, what do you do with those that have no interest in receiving help? Because we do know we approach individuals all the time with opportunities to get involved with programs, to have temporary housing, to get off the streets, and those services are refused for lots of different reasons, mostly because of mental illness and drug use. But so we asked the question, what do we do with those that are refusing help? And we heard over and over again, don't give up, keep doing what you're doing, reduce barriers. If we have shelters that don't allow dogs, then there's a lot of people that are naturally not going to go into a shelter. If we have shelters that require you to be clean, there's people that won't go into shelter. We also heard from individuals that were experiencing homelessness that we should be cutting off financial aid. Now, we don't give financial aid, so it's not an area that we can control, but I thought that was an interesting perspective from individuals experiencing homelessness, that they see the abuse of the system by some that are on the streets. And then really to focus on addressing addiction before we do anything else. We also asked, given the fact that we have limited resources and we can't do everything for everybody, if we were to focus our limited resources on one thing, what should it be? And this is ranked order by what we heard. Focusing on facilities that can address mental illness and substance abuse, followed by permanent housing, then a day center, and then safe parking or a camping area, and then another emergency shelter in the city. I think that this, in some ways, aligns with our focus right now. I mean, we've been talking about mental illness and drug substance abuse. We don't do anything in that realm, partly because we're not the agency that receives funding in that area, but it's something that we've been talking a lot about. But we do know that our number one goal is permanent housing. So it was kind of assuring to hear that those that were taking the group discussions did hone in on the permanent housing. There was where I think there may be some misalignment, and maybe I could be wrong. I don't know if the general residents in the city of El Cajon want a day center, and I don't know if they want another shelter in the city. I'm not sure if that's what they want, but I don't know. It's one of the reasons why I think we need to have more conversations. Lastly, we asked, I guess next to last, we asked, what does success look like? I mean, we could do this over and over and over again, but if we're not knowing what we should be trying to accomplish, then maybe we're chasing the wrong thing. So one of the things that I thought was important that the group recognizes, that there should be regional parity amongst how homelessness not only impacts communities, but the participation of other communities. And so I would say this county has no parity when it comes to homeless shelters or homeless services. We know that one of the largest shelters that exist in the entire county happens to be in El Cajon. And we know that cities from all over the county rely on that as their source of shelter space. I wouldn't call that parity. What's frustrating to me is the regional organizations that talk about the need for more robust services also seem to endorse this concept that one city, in El Cajon, should shoulder more than other cities. And that has been reinforced by letters. It's been reinforced by public comments. It's been reinforced by letters to the Attorney General. From our own regional organization, the Regional Task Force on Homelessness, has not been focusing on regional parity, where I think that needs to be their focus here forward. The other thing they talked about was neighborhoods should feel and look safe and clean. People don't want to see shelters or encampments popping up. They don't want to see needles on the street. They don't want to see trash left behind. They also want to ensure that there's this balance between interests, because there is a lot of competing interests in the homeless programs that we offer. We're trying to help individuals, but at the same time, we're not allowing camping, right? So there's this balancing act, and so there was this interest for what at least success would look like. We're balancing that in an appropriate way, whatever appropriate means. So the last question we asked about was, what should we be doing more of, or maybe less of? But things that we heard was breaking up illegal encampments, providing more outreach with greater wraparound services, ensuring that there's some accountability with how the money is being spent in our own community, and not just from our own city money, but everybody's money, because we know millions of dollars are being spent, a lot of that into the city of El Cajon, and is it making a difference? One of the things I thought was interesting is less blaming, although I just blame somebody. But we do point our fingers at a lot of folks, and there's a lot of finger pointing that goes along on this county. And then the ongoing, the need, the recognition that one program doesn't fit everybody, where the Housing First model may work for some. Clearly, the Housing First model doesn't work for others, and I think there's a need to have some difference of programs to ensure that everyone's needs are being met. And then the ability to share success stories, which can be complicated. When we get someone off the street, they may not want us in their home taking pictures of their new setup and saying, look at these people, now they're in a house. So we'll do some more brainstorming at the staff level to see how we can share some of our successes, whether it's data, but having that personal story is really important. I mean, Mr. Ortega is a great example. We saw 9 individuals, and there's some that would say 9 individuals is like nothing in it's a drop in the bucket, right? But the reality is if every company, large and small, took on 2 people or 1 person, imagine the difference that could be made. And so sharing those types of experiences are really important, I think. So with that, really quickly, let me just kind of focus on a couple other data points. As part of that survey, we did ask about, is homelessness important to you? It stayed about the same. So the town halls had no influence of whether homelessness is important. As you can see, it's pretty important on a scale of 10. We also asked about the importance of finding permanent housing. You can see that our messaging in the town hall meetings actually did influence some folks to think more about the idea of permanent housing, which I think is important. But I also thought it was interesting that there was actually a less of importance of cleaning up encampments, which I do not think that aligns at all with our residents. Based on the calls that we get in the city manager's office and the emails that we receive, that you receive, I do not think that aligns with the general public's perception of what we should be doing. So lastly, I think the town halls were helpful but not definitive. As part of that, we have reached out to PTAs, the business community. So we actually met with the PTA President's Council, and we have at least 1 invitation in the beginning of the school year to go to a PTA site. We are working with a church right now that's trying to engage a whole bunch of other churches and invite us to their church facility, and they'll invite a whole bunch of their neighboring churches to that. So that's being worked on. It'll likely be in August. We're working on some dates. I'd love for some city council involvement there. We're planning on hosting a specific business town hall with the Chamber of Commerce. We're working with them on some dates also in August. So we're hoping to get some additional voices and perspectives, because what we did not see at the town halls is we did not see very many parents. We saw very few people from the recent immigrant community. We've also, by the way, we reached out to Mohammed Twama to try to get in before his group. So I think it's important that we hear from some different perspectives than just the groups that we heard from before. And then I think at the regional level and at the city level, I think we need to start seeing how we actually can move the dial when it comes to mental illness and drug addiction. And then we heard a call for another shelter or day center, and I think it'd be important for staff to understand what the city council's appetite is for that. One of my concerns is that we continue to shoulder more and more and more, where our neighboring cities have not thus far. So when we conclude, it'd be important for me as a staff member to kind of hear what is it that the council wants in terms of us focusing on either another shelter or a day center. So with that, staff's here to answer any questions, and we'd love to hear your discussion.
Thank you, Graham. Questions for Graham? Steve, you want to start?
One of my takeaways from the forums was that the residents seemed to say, what are the other cities going to do? Are they going to give us money if we're going to buy a shelter? One of my concerns is if we build another shelter in the city, that other cities will use us even more than they are already now. We know that I could name 4 cities that use facilities in El Cajon, motels and transitional housing for their shelter availability so that they can enforce Boise. I'm afraid if we just build another shelter, they're just going to ramp it up even more. So I think the public would be concerned about building another shelter here. I did sit in a presentation for Sunbreak Ranch, which is kind of a downtown partnership. They're talking about it on Miramar land. I don't see that going anywhere. It's federal land, it's military land, and that I may not be alive if that thing ever gets passed on that kind of land. It would take so long. I see that concept, though, working well in some ways. I have 8 questions I've posed to them. What if they don't want to stay? What if they don't want to, how do they get off the ranch? I think that's a good concept for county unincorporated land. Homelessness is a county-wide issue, and it would be nice to see the county step up with land for this kind of a thing that would serve the entire region for a county solution. And finally, I guess I'd just like to acknowledge our police department special enforcement unit, who really do break up encampments very quickly. Probably within a couple of days, that the number of times that I report them is, I think I've done 1 this year so far, where I did dozens last year. So their efforts certainly are keeping the public health good, keeping the safety of neighborhoods good, and we've got a great combination of things going right now. I would probably support the Sunbreak Ranch on county property.
If I can comment on Mr. Goebel's comment, I was recently talking with somebody in our special enforcement unit, and he mentioned he's never worked in a police assignment where there is so much interest in what he did. But there's a lot of interest in what he does at all levels of the community, from the city council all down to average resident. So.
Phil? I'll go to Gary after that.
Thank you. Thank you, Graham. As I said before, the town halls were fantastic. The structure of them, I think that should be a model for any more public engagement town hall where the public can give their experience and their ideas and questions. It was a positive experience as opposed to the traditional town hall where people are just yelling. One thing that I got out of this was we need to define what type of homeless person we're talking about. And I think when the public and staff or elected officials define what type of homeless person we're discussing, 99% of the time the public agrees with how those individuals should be dealt with, whether it's the Prop 57 early release criminal, or it's the single mom living out of her car, or whether it's the person with mental health and addiction issues. I've said that at every town hall, and I think we really need to lead with that definition whenever we have these discussions, or else we're just going to talk over each other and fight. The other thing I'm realizing is I don't feel comfortable defining people with addiction and mental health as homeless. Referring to them as homeless means that that's their number one issue that's their most immediate need is that they don't have a roof over their head. And it's very difficult for me to look at someone who's in crisis, whether because of mental health or drug induced psychosis on meth, running through traffic and looking at them and saying what that person needs is a home. That's very difficult for me to call it a homeless issue. So I don't feel comfortable calling it a homeless issue. It's a drug and mental health crisis that those people are experiencing now. The mom living out of her car, that's traditionally what we would describe as she's homeless. She needs help. She needs a hand up. So when we're talking about this topic, I think defining those terms is crucially important. The other thing is not all homeless shelters are created equal. And I think that with regard to Mr. Goebel's point and our city manager's point, other cities or municipalities or even communities not wanting shelters, maybe we bring other elected officials on a tour of ECTLC or of the tiny home village at Meridian Baptist and tell them, hey, drive by on a Tuesday at 1 o'clock or Saturday at 10 o'clock at night. And you can see that the impact that you think it's going to be on your community is not what you think it's going to be. And maybe, pressing our colleagues a little bit to ask them, what needs to happen for you to support a project in your area? Maybe it's just a tour of a facility. So as long as you have a contractor that's operating the shelter space responsibly, it has a very minimal effect. And in fact, I would say that ECTLC has a positive effect on that area, as opposed to what people perceive as a negative effect. The ECTLC, that area, that is a property that is better because ECTLC is there. I agree with Mr. Goebel. I'm very weary of approving another site in El Cajon. I'm very, very weary of it because of the same reasons that Mr. Goebel said and our city manager said as well. So I'm in agreement on that point. Thank you.
Joe, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, it was Gary's turn. I apologize. I forgot Gary.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with everything that my colleagues, Councilmember Ortiz and Councilmember Goebel have said. This city has done more for the homeless than any of the other cities in the county. And I look at ECTLC as really a superstar in the business of taking care of the homeless. Since January 1st of 2016, I've always had at least 2 graduates staying at my house. They come in and they get their credit fixed up and they stay at my house and they do a great job and they even mop the floor for me sometimes. But they move on to other things. They've got a job that they've had under their belt for a couple years. And I've become friends with them. I'm still in contact with a lot of them. And I don't think we need any more homeless shelters in El Cajon. We've done our part. We've even have 200 kids staying at ECTLC. And at any given time, in fact, I just checked a week ago, they have 50 beds available. And they go out and they talk to these people that are sleeping on the sidewalks and in the alleys. And they just don't want any help, the vast, vast majority of them. So I think what we have left now are the real hardcore of the homeless. Now, that's different than the mom that's living in her car with the kids. With them, I think it's important that we try everything we can to get them housing. And as Councilmember Ortiz said, it's not a drug problem with them. It's just a matter of circumstances most of the time. I don't want to encourage or pay for the self-destructive lifestyle of the homeless that are addicted to drugs and the ones that are breaking into cars and, hassling people when they want to go shopping, or the ones that are at the freeway exits begging for money that make our community look bad. And I especially wish that we had some way of protecting our retailers from the homeless running in and grabbing their products and running out the door. But that's, again, a state issue where hands are pretty much tied on that. So I think that we're headed in the right direction with the city regarding the homeless. I like to call it tough love. And at some point, they have to show some personal responsibility with, a helping hand from the city. I know that each one of them out here in the streets have been approached by various social service agencies and ECTLC about 5 times. But they're going to keep talking to them, and someday maybe a large number of them will hit bottom, realize, I don't want to die in the gutter, and will turn their lives around. So, and everything that I hear from the public is they do not like the situation where people have their tents on the street or the sidewalks, and I think that's just not tolerable. I don't want to end up like San Francisco or Los Angeles, where they're just blocks and blocks of tents. And I want to commend our police department. They've done a fantastic job of getting rid of the homeless camps, especially when they pop up in downtown El Cajon. They're gone pretty quick. So thank you, Chief. I really appreciate your efforts on that. And I know it's not an easy job, and they see the same people over and over. And that's all I have to say right now.
Thank you, Gary. So I got a couple of things I'd like to say. First off, as far as the forums go, I thought one of them was kind of good and interesting. But there are so many people there from the NGO community, so many people that were kind of intricately involved in making their living from providing for homeless shelters or homeless services, and so deeply involved in that it didn't really feel to me like a real town hall. It felt more like a homeless forum amongst the people that were working in the homeless industry, and people that were tasked with providing funds and shelter. And if that's what we're going for, that's fine. But I would like to find a way to actually have public forums where we could really interact with the public and less interacting with activists. And there's a place to interact with activists, but I was really curious to find out not only what the people of El Cajon, the residents of El Cajon, were thinking and feeling, but also I was looking forward to the opportunity for them to be educated, because there's so many misconceptions about what homelessness is, what we can do, what we should be doing, what the laws say, where our hands are tied. All those things I think would have been valuable if we had been able to get to that. So,
Mr. Mayor, I think you're right. I mean, that's why it took us 3 to figure that out. But that last 4th town hall, we segregated the service providers from, I guess, the average resident, right? And I thought it was useful to have that conversation, for them to have the conversation without that involvement. I thought that was useful. It's one of the reasons, I think, at the conclusion, one of the challenges, you can't say everyone's invited. We want everyone to show up, but except for you people, right?
Yeah.
But it's one of the reasons that we're targeting local churches and PTAs and business groups, because I think we're going to then almost thrust ourselves on people. Cause listen, if you're a parent, Phil's a young parent still, right? You got kids in school, you got kids in sports, finishing up soccer practice. Coming out to a city meeting at 6:30 on a Tuesday evening is a really hard thing to do, right?
My wife let me know that too, yeah.
I'm sure she did. So I think if we can go to them, I think that may break down that barrier that you're concerned about.
But I think you're exactly right. I think going to a church and advertising for several weeks beforehand that on this Sunday after services, if you'd like to stick around and talk with city officials about this, it might be more valuable, or at least valuable in a different way.
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Now, as far as new shelters go, I'm certainly not interested in any kind of a housing first model. I think in regard to that, we are doing our fair share, and we shouldn't. There's plenty of room within the county for the housing first model. In fact, since really the state of California says you can't spend any money on a program that isn't making housing first their primary model, you can't do it. So if you have a program like ECTLC or the Rescue Mission, you can't fund those programs because they require sobriety. They have some rules about conduct and behavior. So since the rest of the world is basically embracing this, I am interested in being more as the place where there's an alternative for programs that work. Now, in order to do that, you have to have programs that are funded by private donations in the business community. And ECTLC has done a great job of that. I'm also a big fan of the San Diego Rescue Mission, and I see what they're doing with private donations, and I'm really impressed with their huge vision. They really intend to significantly put a dent in homelessness in San Diego. They're building huge shelters throughout the county, and I know they'd like to come and be involved in El Cajon. I was interested when they wanted to come out, and we were going to use the county's funds for that, which, by the way, the county should be giving us funds for that because that's what the county's job is. The county's job is to allocate those mental health funds and those drug and alcohol funds and those housing funds throughout the county. It seems ironic to me that they are putting so much emphasis on El Cajon and placing so many of these people in El Cajon, and yet they're stingy when it comes to giving any allocations to resources. But having said that, if we were to bring the rescue mission in to build another shelter, they would be paying for themselves. They would be providing their own funding. And I think that there's a place for that here. I remember when I was on the council when the East County Transitional Living Center first came in front of us, and these halls were filled with people very, very concerned that if we built ECTLC, that this would be a magnet towards homeless people throughout the county, and that it would cause our homeless problem to increase. I don't think it's easy to make the case that that's happened. I think we've helped a lot of people. And frankly, that's why I got into working in mental health in the first place, and then later getting on the city council. I wanted to help people. I've always had a deep, abiding need to do that. And so I still want to look at the opportunity to help people, but in helping people in ways that actually helps. Because we could argue about the merits of housing first, but I think if you look at the fact that after $17 billion has been spent on housing first, we've increased the number of housing stock by 35% for homeless individuals, and we've seen 48% more people on the streets. Housing first is a abject failure, and the only people who won't agree to that and don't admit that are the people that are making billions of dollars off the business of being in the business of treating homelessness. So I just want to keep an open mind. And I say this because I'm going to be meeting with Donnie D., who is the CEO of the Rescue Mission, on Thursday. I imagine he wants to talk to me about looking at a way to get the county to come back in and put some money into building a shelter, and then later on he would agree to pay for the regular upkeep of it. And I don't think we should use the concept that if we build it, they will come idea. I think we know from experience with ECTLC that if we build it and we do it the right way, people will get helped. and they'll get clean and they'll get off the streets. And I feel good about that. So I know we're not making a decision on that today, but I just want to be in complete disclosure. I'm going to be coming and advocating for that in the future. So thank you. Yes, Steve.
I guess to have an open discussion,
Sure.
if there are 50-some beds available at ECTLC, one implication is if you want off the street in El Cajon, there's a place ready. It does have rules. It's not just housing first. It does have rules.
It does.
So that almost says then there are still a lot of people living on the streets of El Cajon who don't want to get off the streets of El Cajon.
I think that's true, yeah.
And so if we build another shelter when we have excess capacity here, it does mean by default you'll be bringing people in from outside the city, and which is, we have compassion because ECTLC is already doing that. We've seen police cars from other agencies drop off people there. The problem is not getting people help. The problem is those that bounce out of the program remain in El Cajon and become our management now instead of the place from where they came. And I think that's the concern of some of the town hall residents that I heard is, we'll help, but from people from outside the area because, hey, we've got great partnerships. It is our partnerships that have placed 972 people in housing in the past 3 or 4 years. It's not us. We provided funding. They're doing great work. Rescue mission, absolutely. The concern is if we bring people from outside the city, that if they bounce out, that they remain here. I think that's what our residents told us in the town halls.
Well, first off, I don't come today complete with a plan. It's just those are my thoughts. If we get to the point where the rescue mission wanted to build in El Cajon, I think those are valid questions that we would have to ask them and have answers to. I do think it's a different program than I've been kind of involved with both. My wife was a therapist at San Diego Rescue Mission, so I spent a lot of time down there. And I think it's a very different program than ECTLC, so it's going to attract a different kind of person. There are some people that are going to have, frankly, ECTLC is a more religious program than this is. So I think there probably are room for people on the streets that have rejected a religious program completely that might be willing to go to the rescue mission. That seems to be what's happened in San Diego. But the other part of it is I think I just want to hear what they had to say. I'm just saying that I would be reluctant to bring in a housing first kind of model where I wouldn't necessarily be reluctant to see ECTLC expand or to see the rescue mission come in and fill another space. And you're right, if they could show us that there was a way they could do that without causing our problem to increase. And so that's kind of where I don't know the answers to your, yeah.
So from what I understand from ECTLC, right now they're in need of family shelter. The singles, usually you can get beds for a single person, either to go out to the ranch or to the 2 dormitories that they have. But what they're in short supply of is family rooms. So if you've got 10, they have a waiting list for their families to get in. And so, yes, if one of us were to call, they would do us, a solid and help us get that person in. But if it's just a mom and her kids coming up and say, I need shelter, there is a waiting list for that. I think part of the problem is that if the singles, I think we can handle. But I think there's some responsibility for families that we need to get or have additional shelter for families. It's becoming increasingly more and more difficult for families to pay rent. A lot of people want rent control. They want low-income housing. And we've talked about that before, where ownership does clean up a neighborhood. And I agree. But when you still have an enormous amount of people who cannot make it on just what their wages are, I would like to see more tiny homes. I've been trying to get a mom into ECTLC, and I talked to Pastor Rowland today, and he's got a waiting list for his tiny homes. That's a need, something for the moms and the kids. The mom that I'm trying to get in is a mom with a baby. That one's kind of shady right now as far as what's going on. But still, we don't have if ECTLC doesn't have a bed and the tiny homes are gone, what does she have? And the funding is run out for vouchers from Home Start, from what I understand. It's either slowing down, and I could be, if somebody else has different information on that. So I agree with you. I don't like the housing first model. I think we do need to look at having housing or having shelter options that address the different needs, like for dogs, or, that's a barrier to get people into housing. But before we brought anybody in, I'd like to see if Santee's going to go through with getting their shelter. And I think that's coming up. Does anyone know what the status is on that? Because I know that the county's been talking to Santee about it. They turned it down completely? Okay. But I agree with you.
To your point, the rescue mission would be a good alternative for that because they do take families in. So, all right. So where are we at? I need to ask Angela, did she receive any comments for this?
Yes, thank you, sir. We have one speaker, Rebecca Brandstetter.
Hello. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Good. I'd like to. My name is Rebecca Brandstetter. I want to take this time to commend both the city staff, I see a lot of them sitting along the perimeter of this room, and the mayor and council for convening those 4 community meetings on homelessness in our city. It was gratifying to me as a citizen and encouraging to me as a volunteer for the East County Homeless Task Force to see our city actively tap into the compassion, intelligence, and life experience of our community to work together and find solutions to an issue that affects us all. Having attended all 4 meetings, I was particularly struck by the number of everyday residents who really want to be part of the solutions. So many people ask, what can I do? I hope that working with the city and outreach workers and faith communities and civic organizations, that we can find tangible, real-life ways to get concerned and willing community members involved in a hands-on way. These meetings provided an important first step toward giving our community members a factual working knowledge of the issue before we can expect any kind of sustained support or even tolerance for a number of solutions. Because it's only then, when we're educated, that we can begin to understand and solve the problem as a community. And I mention this as a first step simply because the discussions in those meetings focus primarily on the people who are unsheltered and living outside, to your point, Councilmember Ortiz. That was clearly an appropriate place to start. But I hope we can use the momentum and goodwill from those meetings to explore ways to look at other, more hidden aspects of homelessness and housing insecurity, especially knowing that in this past school year, Cajon Valley Unified Schools identified 500 children in grades K through 12 who are homeless. We can be sure their housing insecurity affects their learning, it impacts their teaching, and it costs us all in the long run. So going forward, I hope we can use the model of the community meetings as a building block to broader support and cooperation with each other and our government on a number of issues that affect our common life, maybe even Parkway Plaza visioning. I hope that shapes us into a real community, the best kind of community. And as a side, I'd like to say that I really appreciate the opportunity that the city encouraged and arranged for us to have to ride along with the outreach workers from Home Start. That experience was eye-opening in so many ways. Seeing the heartbreaking conditions under which so many people live and witnessing the dedicated, tireless fearless compassion of the outreach workers who keep coming back until their clients are finally ready to come inside. So thank you again to our dedicated city staff, to our dedicated city council and mayor for opening yourselves to these sometimes difficult conversations and for giving us your time and the opportunity to meet together and work together for the city we all share. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any more discussion, or somebody like to make a motion?
Move to receive the report.
Yeah. Second. All right, please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to take a quick break, but we'll be back in 5 minutes or less and continue the meeting. Thank you.
Council, while you're on your break, you'll notice, you may not notice, but we had a zoning map on that back wall. You probably can't even see it. I don't even know when it was changed, but we've replaced it with an art piece that a local business donated to us. So,
Beautiful.
in your milling about, you may want to go check out that piece of art.
Pretty amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. We're going to go ahead and continue, and Graham Mitchell has got something to tell us.
Mr. Mayor and Council, we have actually another speaker on the last agenda item. The mayor recommended that we hear that speaker, and then I would recommend that we move agenda item 14 up to their next item and take that out of order if the council is okay with that.
Sounds good. You want to invite the next speaker to come up?
Of course, Victor Navarro.
Hello, sir.
How you doing, Mayor?
Good. Welcome.
So I'm kind of nervous because I never speak, but and now you know my real name. But I hear you guys, right? And I'm very active on Facebook on alcohol happenings and everything. And the problem is everybody hates the mall. And malls aren't dying. Plaza Bonita's booming. UTC's booming. I took my daughter. She goes to Grossmont High. She ran into like 3 of her friends at UTC. It's just our mall. Has a bad rap, and I'm always on there defending it. They say it's a trafficking circle or a trafficking center or whatever. And then some city council members punish business owners from the mall, so that doesn't look good. But anyways, that's the one item, you know. You gotta want people to come to our mall, but nobody wants to come. If you're on alcohol happenings, everybody hates the mall. They talk crap about it. So I think if you had some good stores in there and clean up the image, people would come, you know. So that's first and foremost. And then the second item is the homeless forums. I went to every single one of them for free. I don't get paid, obviously, right? I went because of me, because I care, because I live here. And like the first 2 was 90% people who were getting paid or they have a vested interest, or she left. Vested interest, so it's kind of like a joke. I think maybe the 3rd or 4th, maybe in his district, people actually came out. Maybe like 15 people were actually citizens. You know, everybody else, they got money, you know. They want to make money, you know, off this homeless complex. And so that's one thing. But the second thing is you already have ECTLC. You already have all the homeless motels with 195 people. And then Homestart, Passwell, we got like 13 services. You really want to bring another shelter here? You know, and then it goes back to the Facebook. Everybody on Facebook, I even tag her sometimes when people need help. But everybody knows where to go. You go to alcohol, and they'll take you. It might take some time, but they'll take you. So the rescue mission, the way they were operating on 17th and Logan or whatever that was, hundreds of homeless outside. I haven't drove by the one downtown, but I don't know. I understand why you want to keep bringing more and more services.
I understand.
Yeah. And, you know, I know you're having a fundraiser tomorrow. If I got to go tell you there, I'll tell you there too.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay.
Yeah, can I address the trafficking thing? I'd like to get this message out. So from what I understand is many years ago, perhaps more than 10 years ago, a San Diego police detective did a presentation to the group about human trafficking. My understanding is that a slide contained a description of malls as one place where human trafficking can occur, and inadvertently he showed a picture of Parkway Plaza. He did not say Parkway Plaza is a human trafficking source. I believe, I'm going to look to the police. Do I have that recollection right? I have it right. So please do not say Parkway Plaza is a human trafficking hub, because that is false. It's based on false information from something that somebody said from a presentation more than 10 years ago, and it's bad for our city to continue with this false reputation, and it's bad for Parkway Plaza.
Oh, but wait, but I'm not saying that. Everybody else says that. I'm the guy defending them, saying you're full of shit. There's no problems there. And last time I got into it with her little friend, Michelle's friend, and because her daughter's a runaway with a gun and whatever, right? And so I told her, it's not the mall's fault that you got 9 or 10 kids robbing people and doing things. It's the parents' fault. So she went off, she went off on me. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's a trafficking center. I'm saying.
Well, I appreciate that, but your time is up.
All right.
Thank you. Steve, I'm sorry to interrupt.
So I just want to get the word out there that Parkway Plaza is not a place, a hub of human trafficking. And as many people can spread that on Nextdoor, on Facebook, whatever we can do, that would be good for Parkway Plaza businesses and the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Mr. Goebel and the rest of the city council, I actually asked the chief earlier today, because I knew this would probably come up. When is the last time we had someone call 911 about a kidnapping at Parkway Plaza? It's never happened. In the history of Parkway Plaza, no one has been kidnapped from Parkway Plaza. When have we had a report of human trafficking at Parkway Plaza? We've never had a report of human trafficking at Parkway Plaza. I'm sure trafficking occurs all over the place all the time, but there's never been a criminal report of those two things. And so I agree, we need to put out the word, and I know council interacts on social media a lot. I think that needs to be said, and we need to continue beating that drum.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Now we're up to item 14, is that right? Item 14 is for compensation for executive and underrepresented employees under policy A29. The city manager and the city attorney. I'll ask the director of human resources, Marisol Thorne, to please introduce this item.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of the council. I am here again this year to go over a brief summary of the proposed changes for the compensation plan for employees under City Council Policy 829, as well as contract amendments for the city manager and the city attorney. This year, staff is recommending a 3.5% cost of living increase for non-safety employees under this City Council policy and 5% for safety employees. These adjustments align with our municipal and safety represented groups. Additionally, we're recommending an increase to the cafeteria benefit allotment that will be in effect January of 2024 for $1,450 per month. And as stated in the report that was presented to you, there are other adjustments, including market adjustments for specific classifications. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions? Thank you, Marisol.
Thank you.
Any speaker cards on this item?
No speaker cards, sir.
Okay. So is now the time that I read this statement?
Now is the time.
First, I need to state that California law requires that prior to taking final action on the salary schedules, or compensation paid in the form of fringe benefits of what are known as local agency executives, the legislative body shall orally report a summary of a recommendation for such a final action. A local agency executive includes any employee of the city who is not subject to the Myers-Milius-Brown Act and who is the city manager, the assistant city manager, a department head, or whose position is held by an employment contract, which includes the city attorney. So for the purposes of disclosure, this report includes action on salaries and compensation in the form of fringe benefits for the following local agency executives: City Manager Graham Mitchell, Assistant City Manager Vince DiMaggio, City Attorney Morgan Foley, City Clerk Angela Cortez, Director of Community Development Anthony Shute, Director of Finance City Treasurer Clay Cajon, Director of Human Resources Marisol Thorne, Director of Information Technology Sarah Diaz, Director of Public Works Yasmin Ariano, Director of Parks and Recreation Frank Carson, and Police Chief Michael Moulton. Now for the proposed changes. First, it is proposed that each of these employees, with the exception of the police chief, receive a general salary cost of living increase of 3.5% effective June 24th, 2023. And it is proposed the police chief and the position of fire chief receive a general cost of living increase of 5%. The following are the proposed market adjustments for these employees: an additional 3% for the city clerk, 2% for the director of information technology and the director of finance, 9% for the director of parks and recreation, 7% for the director of public works, and 5% for the director of human resources and the director of community development. As part of contract amendments for the city manager and city attorney, an increase of $20,000 for the city manager's city contributed deferred compensation and bi-weekly pay adjustment for the city attorney to reflect $7,161.33. Second, it is proposed that each of these employees receive an increase in his or her cafeteria plan benefit of $100 each beginning in January of 2024, $1,450. I should note that the current benefit is $1,350 each month. As further compensation, it is proposed that the police chief continues to receive a non-personable stipend of $6,300, one half of which would be paid in July, that other half of which being paid in December. Additionally, it is proposed that the police chief receive an annual increase in uniform benefits of $325, bringing the annual amount to $1,000. This concludes the summary of proposed changes to salaries and compensation in the form of fringe benefits to the city executives as is required by law. Now, before we move along, there is a report from the city manager on this matter. Or is there a report?
Mr. Mayor, I have no report, but I can answer any questions that you may have, as well as Ms. Thorne.
Any questions? All right, thank you. Next, I would like to ask the City Council if you have any discussion before we ask for any comments from the public. All right, thank you, Angela. I think I asked you before, but just to make sure, do we have any speakers on this?
No speaker cards.
Okay. At this point, I'm looking for a motion and a second on this agenda item.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
Okay. All right. Going back in time now to item 12, which is an analysis of recent changes in other cities in San Diego County regarding camping and personal property in public areas. I'll ask the Assistant City Manager to please introduce this item.
Thank you, Mayor, members of Council. City of Poway and City of San Diego have recently adopted changes to their municipal code regarding camping regulations. The City of San Diego approved their ordinance on June 13th, just a couple of weeks ago, and the City of Poway adopted their ordinance, which will take effect barring the absence of a second reading or the denial of a second reading. They will have a second reading on that July 18th, and that will take effect 30 days thereafter. There are a lot of nuances, and both the ordinances are substantially the same, but there are a lot of nuances, so I didn't prepare a PowerPoint presentation with a matrix because I would rather just verbally explain what the changes are to the ordinances, and then I'll summarize how we address the very same issue. This is an outgrowth of Martin v. Boise. The two ordinances come out of that. And as you'll recall, and I'll just state for those who don't know, Martin v. Boise was a Ninth Circuit Court case from 2018 that basically said the cities cannot enforce anti-camping ordinances if they don't have shelter space available for their homeless population. It was held under the Eighth Amendment to the United States Constitution that criminalizing sleeping on public property or on public sidewalks because there's an absence of shelter space is cruel and unusual punishment. And so it's a novel approach to Eighth Amendment jurisprudence. It's typically the Eighth Amendment, you'll see larger scale arguments such as should minor offenders be sentenced to life in prison without parole? Is that cruel or unusual? This is a novel approach to whether or not cruel and unusual punishment is constituted by this. So it was interesting. And in 2019, the United States Supreme Court had an opportunity to take this up for review because Boise appealed it, and that was turned down. So whether there will be future cases in which Martin v. Boise is brought up is yet to be seen. The ruling, however, leaves undecided the issue of whether it's legal to set limits on which specific public properties camping and sleeping is prohibited. So it's into this legally ambiguous gap that the San Diego and Poway ordinances seek to drive through. Now, I'll start with a brief summary of the Poway ordinance. Poway's ordinance permits camping only in areas specifically designated for that use, such as designated campgrounds. Their enforcement of the ordinance is progressive. They have staffing and contractors that will offer shelter placement if available. If that's refused, the person must leave the location where the unauthorized camping is occurring. And finally, if the person refuses to relocate, a citation or arrest can occur. The ordinance prohibits, in all cases, unauthorized camping in a city park, regardless of whether there's shelter space available. The ordinance also prohibits, in all cases, obstructing public sidewalks by sleeping or storing property, again, regardless of whether there's shelter space available. With regard to materials that are found or personal belongings that are found, the ordinance has a separate section that addresses this. The ordinance mandates that the city shall first leave notice in a prominent place and that the notice shall include a timeline for when the personal property must be removed from the public property. This could be a park, this could be a sidewalk, this could be any public property. If the time frame notice on the notice expires, the property can be confiscated, but it then has to be stored and inventoried and then stored for a period of 90 days. And if it's unclaimed, it can be disposed of. So there are exceptions to that rule. For example, if the personal property is found or elements of the personal property pose an imminent danger, or there's an infestation of something that could be constituted to be a threat to public health, it does not need to be inventoried and stored. It can be disposed of and destroyed immediately. So those are the two things that are in the Poway ordinance. I'll move now to the San Diego ordinance, which is known as the unsafe camping ordinance, informally known as the unsafe camping ordinance. And it's very similar, although we're dealing with a bigger city with more public properties, and so it's a bit more expansive. The San Diego, let me talk about the personal property regulations first, since we just ended that on Poway. Again, effort must be made to locate the property owner prior to the removal of the property that's blocking or standing on the public property. And abandoned property can be declared abandoned and then stored for 90 days. The ordinance sets forth regulations for where that public property can be stored. Again, campgrounds. But if it's on the public sidewalk or in public parks, it can be confiscated. But it doesn't have the same noticing requirements that the Poway ordinance has. It can be confiscated immediately, but it must be stored if it's not a danger to public health. So there's a little bit of a difference there in terms of the public property aspect of things, abandoned public property or unattended public property. With regards to the regulations on encampments or camping on public property, the San Diego ordinance specifies street, sidewalk, park bench, beach, waterway, or open space areas. So again, even if there's no shelter space available, the ordinance prohibits camping unless there is it prohibits camping, but 3 broadly worded encampment prohibitions that are open to interpretation. The one is when there is an immediate threat or unreasonable risk to harm to a person or public health and safety. So those, it does not matter whether there's shelter space available. The ordinance can be enforced if there's a threat to public health, safety, or an individual, or a disruption of vital government services. Now, those are broadly worded and can be broadly interpreted, so there's a chance that people can be removed from public property without there being shelter space available. The other distinction from the Poway ordinance with regard to camping is the locational prohibitions. Again, it's very specific. There can be no encampments or camping within 2 blocks of a school, within 2 blocks of a shelter, in any open space, waterway, banks of a waterway, within any transit hub or trolley platform, or any park where signs are posted prohibiting camping. So again, the ordinances are similar, but they're talking about very specific locations, and these very specific locations is what has gotten critics of the San Diego ordinance arguing about it. They say, well, in one case you can have a shelter and you're 2 blocks away, and so there could be someone sleeping on the sidewalk across the street, but across the street from that, it could be within the 2-block area, and so you can't be camping. So there's some argument and maybe some legal challenges to these locational prohibitions. Now, as far as what the current El Cajon ordinance has, our municipal code separates it into 3 different areas: Title II, Title IX, and Title 12. And the reason for this is that city councils in the past have had various ordinance changes come about over time in response to specific instances that were of concern to the council. And so those specific instances had ordinances that were placed in different parts of the municipal code. For example, in Title 12, we have the language, no person shall use or occupy any part of a public sidewalk, street, or alley for any purpose other than normal pedestrian or vehicle traffic. So clearly, it's a different language than we find in the other more recent ordinances, but clearly sleeping or camping is not the original intention of that facility, so that would be prohibited. In Title II, we have 2 areas that speak to this. No person shall do any of the following acts within the premises of any city park or playground. 1, obstruct the free travel of vehicles or pedestrians on any road, avenue, walk, or path, obviously within the city park. Or 2, camp, lodge, or sleep overnight or between the hours of 10:30 p.m. and 7 a.m. So that was a specific concern that was addressed and placed in Title II at one time or another. And then we had our own locational prohibitions, which is now placed in Title IX and applies to the area that we know locally as the Superblock, which includes the Civic Center, Judson Park, and Prescott Promenade, which says it is unlawful for any person to camp, lodge, or sleep within any public facility or any public grounds in the Superblock. Now, that was later followed in the same title with the section that says that sleeping or camping is prohibited on all city property citywide. So it expanded from the Superblock to the entire city. So this is just a summary of the most recent things that have been going on in the county, and staff is here to answer questions or take direction as to what, if any, changes you would like to make to our current ordinance. There is no staff recommendation on this. However, there is some prudence in waiting to see how the Poway and San Diego ordinances are actually administered, since they're so recently adopted, and there's been some threat of legal challenge. And so we may want to wait 6 months, a year to see what happens with that. We may want to just kind of monitor it. We clearly have things in our ordinance that continue to allow us to do what we've been doing to abate these type of things. But at this point, staff is willing and able to do whatever the council's direction is.
Thank you, Vince. Questions?
I read an article. It was a judgment, I think, in Arizona regarding some business owners in the downtown area. So where does that, do we know legally where that leaves us? It seems like cities are stuck between the judgment of a federal judge making the judgment in favor of business owners who sued the city, because of a homeless encampment that became a public nuisance. But then we're also on the other side stuck between the Martin and Boise decision. So it seems like we're kind of stuck between two decisions, two different courts.
Well, there's clearly as I mentioned in the staff report, there's a conflict between how various circuits interpret this one issue. And for whatever reason, the Supreme Court, which usually resolves those conflicts, chose not to take it up. Maybe it wasn't the right kind of case for them to give it a more expansive ruling. What the problem is that even when we look at the Poway and San Diego ordinances, it speaks expansively about public property. But it doesn't say anything, nor can it really, say anything about private property. So a private property owner can call and say, I'll give you a trespassing slip. What can happen is the police can enforce that, and then we have to look at what our enforcement options are. And that's another set of state laws that really tie our hands with regard to what we can do. Even when you're trespassing somebody who is camping in a doorway, off the public sidewalk, but on private property, all we can do is move them along. And even when you look at what the progressive enforcement is of these two ordinances, it's one, if there's shelter space available, here's how to get there. If there's not shelter space available, you're camping in a place that is not designated for camping, so go find one of those, which could be very, very limited and very, very far from where this person is. But basically, it's move away, don't block the public sidewalk. There's no effort, at least in the ordinances, don't speak to anything that the city will take responsibility for moving people into designated campgrounds. What they're trying to do here is take the area of Boise that was silent and regulate it. Okay, because there's still a question about what the court meant with regard to what specific public properties can be in this enforcement. And so they're saying, well, you didn't say anything about sidewalks, you didn't say anything about beaches, you didn't say anything about other things. So we do have designated campgrounds, for instance, and that's where you can camp. I'm just giving you an example. And as long as we provide an area where you can camp, if we don't have shelter, then that's the place you can go. So I don't think the legal conflict is done yet, but the way those conflicts get resolved is you have ordinances that eventually go through the process.
Any more questions? Just a question, Vince. Is there anything that's pointing to us needing to take any kind of action regarding our current policy?
I believe, and I've discussed it with the city attorney, I believe that what's currently in the municipal code continues to allow us to administer the programs we're administering, to address sleeping and camping that's happening on sidewalks, allows the police department and staff to enforce that. If at some time in the future these ordinances prove to be successful and are not subject to legal challenge, I think it's worth maybe revisiting and consolidating our municipal code, which is, regulations which are in 3 different areas, consolidating it into one area and maybe strengthening it. But right now there's not really a need that the city attorney nor I see in reviewing these 2 ordinances and looking at the programs that we currently enforce and administer that require us to take action at this moment.
So we're in a, if it's not broke, don't fix it situation.
At the moment, yes.
Okay. Do we have any speaker cards?
No speaker cards, sir.
All right. Steve, you wanted to make a comment?
Yeah, on August 18th, there is a court trial. A San Diego Superior Court judge allowed a case against a 59-year-old woman down in the Midway District of Sports Arena to proceed. She had claimed she's being charged with blocking a sidewalk, a misdemeanor charge. And she had 4 claims that her constitutional rights were being violated. The judge said no to all 4 of those claims, saying had defendant simply moved her property across the street or down the street, as she's been doing for several years, this case would likely not exist. Defendant has chosen to force this showdown. So August 18th, we're going to get a good sense of what a court will do with somebody blocking a sidewalk. The potential penalties are 6 months in jail and up to a $1,000 fine. I don't know that the county jails are going to take this person unless a judge orders so, and certainly I doubt she has $1,000 to pay the fine. So if she is convicted of this, it will be interesting to see what the sentencing will be as far as enforcement of blocking the sidewalk. I think as a city, I think every city has a moral, if not legal, obligation to keep the sidewalks clear for ADA compliance, much less public health. So August 18th, just 2 months away, be interesting to see how that turns out.
Okay. All right. Council, it's back to you. Do we need a...
Mayor, you can just, if there's no direction to staff subsequent to this, you can just receive the report.
Yeah, let's make a motion to receive the report. Second. All right, please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
Okay. All right, item 13 is a review of third-party contractors providing city beautification services, and I'll ask staff to tell us about this.
Thank you, Mayor, members of City Council. My name is Mike James. I'm your Deputy Director of Public Works and Operations. So today, what we will review always a plan B. So what we're going to review today is all the third-party contracts that involve beautification within the city. And tasks that are assigned to those contracts could be associated with power washing, graffiti, bus shelter maintenance and cleanup, and also picking up of illegal dumping. And this was a task that the City Council assigned, and so with a deadline of this month, so coincidentally very timely. There we go. So the first step that staff wanted to review, and this is a new template, so bear with me as we move forward, is really just wanted to give you a brief summary of how many contractors are involved, and there's 6 contractors that are involved with 9 contracts that impact beautification with the city. And those topics are located at the bottom of the yellow circle in the center of the screen. So looking forward at the first contractor, we would call it, is based upon the P-bid and their partnership, contractual relationship with ECTLC. And not going through and reading everything, but you can clearly see that their team is broken up into a clean and safe team, which focuses upon the graffiti, managing the homeless population, deployment of visible staff, and beautification is really focusing on the aesthetics in the downtown area, and also reducing graffiti, cleaning streets, and coordinating with the police department in instances where their assistance will be needed within the field. So the cost and term is approximately $105,000, and that's for a 1-year period that the P-bid pays directly to ECTLC. This is a map of the area that's being overseen as a part of that beautification contract, and this is the P-bid map with 2 priority areas, with orange being the higher priority and allocating additional time to that area. The next contractor is GeoCal Environmental Management and Landscaping. So this contractor has 2 contracts with the city. The first of which is applying herbicide for weed abatement within streets, alleys, channels, and other areas. And this is their brand new contractor. This is the first year of their agreement. But prior to that, they're in the second year of their median and right-of-way maintenance agreement. And so this is specifically tying into any of the sidewalk planner areas, center island medians, and you'll probably typically see them maintaining the medians throughout the city. So some of the metrics that are a part of the herbicide application is up on the top left of the sheet that you have before you, and then a sample of the medians and planters that are located or included in the contract are at the bottom left. The next contractor is Sweeping Corps of America, and they had 2 contracts at one point. The first contract was focused primarily on power washing of the bus shelters and providing maintenance of those bus shelters. That contract actually expired in 2022, and at that time they were responsible for up to about 103 bus stops, and the service was performed once every 3 months. And I put an asterisk there because in the staff report there is a reference to weekly, and that is not the case. That was a typo. But the cost and term was $22,000, and during the renewal period, they asked for a 200% increase. And at that time, staff preferred not to do that moving forward, and so staff took that work on as now it's a reactive process. When we get a complaint, we respond with our streets crew. The second service that you're probably more familiar with is with street sweeping throughout the city. So as was approved on the consent agenda today, that cost and term was up to $517,000, and the agreement's in the first year of 2 years, and that can be extended through 26. And those are just some of the metrics on the left-hand side that talk about both of those agreements. Now, the map is a little bit hard to see, but it's a sample of the sweeping schedule throughout the city. Top left is residential monthly. Top right is the main arterials weekly, and then as we go into the bottom left are the medians weekly. And then what's hard to see in the bottom right are the actual parking lots that are swept each week. The next contractor is St. Madeline Sophie Center, and they are focused on emptying the public trash receptacles throughout the city. So right now, there are 89 receptacles that are a part of their contract throughout the city, and a breakdown of that is shown in the scope of work in the left column. And so 54 are shelters with full furnishings, 32 with a bus bench and trash receptacle, and 3 are just trash receptacles alone. And you can see the frequency of their work, and the majority of their locations are along the main thoroughfares that run west to east throughout the city. Urban Core is the next contractor that provides 2 services, and both of which are citywide cleanup and also graffiti removal. And the council probably is very familiar with this because both entities, or both the single entity in both contracts, rely heavily upon the My El Cajon app, and so I think we've seen a lot of success with this. But it's weekday cleanup of all illegally dumped debris that's reported through the My El Cajon app, and then also with the graffiti response is also reported in the same way. West Coast Arborist takes care of our trees throughout the city, and so we've had a fairly long-standing partnership with them, but it's tree trimming and maintenance services. They also assist us with a lot of advice. I think when it comes to if there's a certain beetle that's been impacting the area and there's evidence that they've seen it potentially in some of the trees in town, they're usually the first ones to call, or they're the first ones to call us. They also provide 24/7 response services for trees down that are bigger than what our crews or response team can handle. And then lastly, they also partner us with every year to continue our relationship with Tree City USA, to continue our annual partnership with them. And what I wanted to show on the next slide is in the top left, that's just a sample screenshot of what Arbor Access looks like. And that's a proprietary software that West Coast Arborist provides to all their clients. And so you can really drill down into type of tree, some of the metrics on it, height, diameter, type, last time it was maintained. And then they also go through and identify various points throughout the city where we may need more trees, where there's a gap in the trees that they've identified. And then what's in the bottom right is just a quick summary. That's not the all-inclusive list, but it just shows the total number of trees that we have, which is almost 6,900, and then at the value of over $14 million. So that briefly went through the reason for this presentation, summary of the contractors and contract work, and now we'll talk a little bit about staff's observations. So on the left side is the green table. That's what I would refer to as the pre-meeting observations. Then at some point there was a meeting or multiple meetings that were held throughout this past year, and that resulted in the post-meeting observations that staff had for each of the contractors. So I think right away, green arrow is good, red arrow, there's some areas that need to be improved, and gray area is kind of right in the middle. That's kind of where we're seeing some improvement, but we think staff think there could be additional steps that could be taken to improve that service to the level that we would expect. And I'll briefly go through the notion of both, or all the tasks or services and the responses from getting where they were rated and where they improved to. So bus shelter power washing, how I briefly responded. Initially, the work was not timely. There were missing some areas and locations. And then that significant cost increase came up, and then staff decided to bring it back in-house. The benefit of that, it's going to be extremely responsive, and you're going to have a lot of institutional knowledge. They're going to know exactly what bus stop it is, and likely exactly the consistent stained area that they're going to be able to respond to. So that's where we're working right now. The only drawback would be it's another work item, and so staff has to integrate that into its existing workload moving forward. Citywide cleanup, and this will also tie into graffiti removal with Urban Core. I think very responsive. The work that they've performed and the ability that they have to positively use the El Cajon app is very responsive. So I think even before the consistent meetings that have been held, their service was good, and after it continues to be good. With the downtown P-bid, I think the effort is there. I think the effort is there and the partnership with ECTLC is there. However, early on in the year, there were instances where the cleaning wasn't thorough, it wasn't timely, and at times there was unresponsiveness to calls and concerns that were being relayed. And then there was a lot of instances of equipment failure that prevented that service from being able to be provided. So staff sat down with PBID and also the ECTLC, because we also have to tread lightly, if you will, because the PBID holds the agreement with ECTLC. And after that meeting, what we really saw was an immediate improvement in responsiveness, in assigning full-time staff to now the cleanup team in the field has one full-time body that's employed by ECTLC. So immediately there's that quality assurance, quality control plan that was put in place. And then there was a quicker response to calls for service, and that continues even to now. I think there's two things that staff would recommend that we continue to work on, and that's why this is in the kind of neutral area. We're in the gray arrow. Power washing is still a concern, and hotspots, which we would refer to like in the downtown area and the promenade. There's hotspots that I think that staff needs to continue to work with the PBID and ECTLC to make sure that we pay attention to those, even to the point of offering training, where our city staff, who has the expertise, can partner and train at least with a full-time employee, and then the cyclical employees that staff that team. So I think that could be an option that staff would take moving forward. St. Madeleine Sophie's, I think there was the effort. It was a lot of effort to try and do the right things when clearing trash from the trash receptacles. However, there just wasn't thorough, and there was missed locations. And after there was a sit-down that staff had with them, it was a dramatic change. It was a re-review of the locations. It was a better understanding of what the expectations of the contract were and what the expectation that the city had of that contract moving forward. And I think that's why it elevated from an area that needed improvement to where it's doing very well right now. Street sweeping, early on, it was interesting. I think there was missed days. There were missed locations. And again, we have GPS tracking capability, so we can monitor and audit, if you will, what they're performing. Inefficient sweeping practices, and what I mean by that is traveling at speeds in excess of 8 miles per hour per the contract, or not using water. And so I think when those two things happen, you're going to get a lot of complaints about speeding street sweeper and also dust cloud following the sweeper. So we heard a lot of that, and we responded to it, and I think there was a lot of unresponsiveness from them. Again, a series of meetings with Sweeping Corps of America, and that has improved. The responsiveness, the quality of work, now that they know that we are actively monitoring them all the time, it was very helpful to have them understand that, hey, we got to make sure that we raise our game to increase the service level for the city. There are a few instances of missing some days, and so that's kind of why this is still in the gray arrow, if you will. We're kind of neutral right now because we haven't quite clearly ironed that out, and SCA is currently going through a management turnover in the San Diego region, and we aren't the only city that's going through that. So most of their other clients, which are almost the majority of the cities to include the county, partner with Sweeping Corps of America. So everybody consistently was having the same issue, so we're working through that right now. And then lastly, with West Coast Arborists, I think very responsive, knowledgeable industry leaders, and very helpful in maintaining our tree inventory. So after staff's observations, I think what you generally have seen is that things needed to improve. They did. So what's the next step? What are some of the phased options that we have? And I think staff really looked at it and went, okay, well, what are some of the low-hanging fruit? What's the low-hanging fruit that we can continue to see success from? That's increasing our scheduling, our contacts, our meetings, our positive communication is the first step. So however we increase that with the contractor, and it could depend on face-to-face calls, emails, text messages, staff will continue to do that because what we found is that the more response that we provide to them, the better their work is. And that's just because we're watching and they know it. The second phase is to continue to try and streamline our approach, to try and encourage all of the contractors that are involved in the beautification projects use our My El Cajon app. The resource it's a great resource. It's easily accessible. the data can be uploaded, photos can be uploaded, and then you can track the status of it. And so I think the next step will be to try and encourage those that don't use it, if there's a way for us to smartly integrate that into their process. That would be one of the next steps that staff would continue to explore. So alternatives, and so these are the bigger questions that staff will have on another slide for you. We're looking at two alternatives. One is, do we want to continue what we're doing with contracts, or do we want to consider bringing the services in-house? And I think those are two important questions that we will get into a little bit further. And do we want to address that by talking about bus stops, power washing, and street sweeping? So that's the big question for the alternatives to consider, because eventually that'll allow you to provide the feedback and direction to staff. But these are the three areas that we just spoke of. So bus stop maintenance, bus stop cleaning is an interesting asset for the city. There could be the opportunity to partner with San Diego MTS, Metropolitan Transit System, to be able to opt into their bus shelter or furniture program. As of right now, during the initial discussions that staff has had with MTS, there is an interest. They have the inventory to manage it. And as of within the last week, approximately 108 bus stops out of our 164 throughout the city could be eligible to partner in the bus shelter furnishing program. And so essentially what it means is the city would be responsible for removing the bus shelter, and then MTS would come in and install some of the newer bus shelters that you typically see in downtown. City of La Mesa has them, where it's more of the silver-looking bus stops and the newer futuristic-looking bus stops. So that could be an option, because then all ongoing maintenance as well as liability will be passed on to MTS at those locations. Now, the reason for about the 2/3, 108 out of 164, 1/3 of our bus stops, so about 54, can be converted now. There's no space issue, which is the biggest issue that we're going to see when we try and look at the other 50, and then the 50 beyond that we likely won't be able to do because of construction limitation issues and easement issues if we have to move forward and to procure an easement. But this is an option where we can assign that ownership to MTS and ongoing maintenance. Power washing. So before we did contract that out, we could consider it again. Staff has a contract draft template available, and we can issue that and advertise that just like any other contract. We could also include hotspots. So that would be the P-bid area or other on-call locations throughout the city. Or there could be an option of, again, doing what we're doing now, but taking a more full-time role in that process, which is bringing on the work in-house and then considering additional staff to be able to perform that work. And then with that work, whether it's power washing, that could also help supplement the RRT, which is very busy and having a tremendous amount of success in picking up illegal dumps and also supporting the partnership with the police department biweekly. And then the last topic is street sweeping. There is value, I think, right now to evaluate the benefits and drawbacks of street sweeping. As you saw in the contract, the amount's about $517,000, and if staff were to move forward with that upfront capital purchase, plus the 1 year of ongoing staffing costs, you're probably looking at something close to $1.2 million, if not a little bit more than that. But again, that's capital, ongoing maintenance, and then if we were to move forward with that, staff would come back with a deeper dive into the benefits and drawbacks of bringing it back in-house. So final slide. Staff in the center box in the top, we reviewed the 6 contractors, 9 contracts, staff's evaluation of each service. We talked about the initial plan, right? Communication. Communication is key. Let's continue down that path. Let's continue using what works, which the My El Cajon app has shown that it has. And then for each of the 3 topics that we covered, questions for the council. Is this something that, for the bus stop ownership or partnership with MTS, is this something that you would like staff to discuss and discuss in greater detail with MTS? And if so, staff would commit to returning to the council in October with those next steps and what they would look like. Power washing. Of the 3 options, which are reactive, which is stay where we're at, don't change a thing, or do we want to contract that out, or do we want to bring that in-house? And if the council wanted to explore that further, staff would request to come back in November. And then also sequentially looking at December, if the street sweeping analysis is something that the city council wanted staff to perform, then staff would do that analysis and then return in December. And so to assist council with the next discussion, that concludes staff's presentation. And as I bring up this slide here, we can leave that. I'll leave that slide up to help facilitate any follow-up questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll let the council ask you questions now. Gary?
Does MTS use in-house people, or do they contract out?
They contract out.
Okay. And do we know anything about other cities that use MTS and how affected that is and the cost?
I know locally, so La Mesa partners with MTS and has for a number of years. I haven't had the chance to follow up with their operations division to talk about responsiveness, cleanliness, complaints. I can speak to an experience with City of Lemon Grove, and I think in that instance that was a partnership that was recommended a few years back to partner with MTS, and after the shelters were removed, MTS quickly came in and erected 10 full bus shelters, which only one has advertisement on there, and that would be at the discretion of MTS if the partnership were to be pursued. But with that, from what I understand, the responsiveness is very good. Within 48 hours of a call, there will be some type of response to graffiti or cleanup at the location. But all other services and work related to the shelters, including the trash can service, is passed on to MTS. Bless you.
Okay, so we would have a possibility that if we went with MTS, we would have bench ads on our benches, or they putting them up in the kiosks now, I guess?
There is a possibility, and I would say that MTS would be very strategic about where they will place an ad, and that involves with ridership. So the onboarding and offboarding is really how MTS will make that decision, at least from the experience that staff has had with this process before. So it won't necessarily be all, as example, 108 shelters. But it could be 10, it could be 50, and I think that's part of the vetting process that staff can explore with MTS should the city council want to move forward. Because right now the ridership numbers, we're coming out of COVID, and I think it's changing. But MTS has a very good idea of what are the most profitable shelters to place the advertisements.
And the difference between their benches and our benches. Regarding people sleeping on the benches, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think structurally they place the crossbars across the top of them, so there's 2 crossbars to hopefully make it more uncomfortable. I think from a practical standpoint and given time, there's remedies that I think some of the homeless population have overcome that by just placing a piece of wood over the top and sleeping within it. So the concern of shelters becoming locations for increased homeless population is there, yes.
And do we lose some control if we were to contract out with MTS?
I don't know if we would necessarily lose control because the control of the stop in and of itself is still managed by MTS. If MTS wants to remove a route or remove a stop, they will do so without city input. I think the control that would potentially not be as tight by the city, held as tight by the city, would be in our response to cleanup. So maybe a response should be that same duty day or that same hours. And if we move forward with the partnership, that response could be 24 hours. So by the time we get a complaint and we forward it to MTS, they process it, and someone comes out to clean it, I think if anything, we would lose that level of responsiveness.
And as far as the cost goes, will we lose money? Would we save money, or do we have any idea at all?
Sure. I think there will be a cost savings because the cost that we reviewed in the contracts, we wouldn't have to pay anymore. So the power washing, the trash can pickup, the trash receptacle cleaning won't have to be burdened by the city. And then any type of infrastructure improvement, so say somebody crashes into one of our bus stops and it has to be replaced, that's no longer on the city to have to replace that. That would be on MTS.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
More questions? Michelle, go ahead.
Excuse me. On the bus stop, tagging on to Mr. Kendrick, their new bus stops or their new shelters, they're going to be, I don't know why, I can't think right now, sun shelters. That was something that has been brought up before, that many of our bus stops don't have any shelter at all. And during the summertime, we have a lot of sun, and it gets pretty hot out here. Anyway, the shelters that MTS would put up, would that give some level of comfort to our riders as far as like shelter from the rain when we do get rain and then sun?
Yes, I believe that the shelters will have more of the three-sided look. So it'll have the large back, and then it'll have on either side, and then a general opening in the front. The roof, from what I can recall, is a solid metal.
Okay.
Solid metal roof. Whereas in some of the instances where we have an issue now, it's where it's the open metal sides, or the top in and of itself could allow more sunlight in and be more susceptible to the elements.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure that if we do partner with MTS, which it would be a cost savings, that at least our bus stops would be a little more accommodating when it comes to the weather, and especially during the summertime. And that would be something that I would support on that. Going to power washing, is there any cost savings? Obviously, there's going to be a cost. If we do it in-house versus what we're doing right now, there's going to be an increase in cost. We'd have retirement and benefits and all of that.
Yes.
What is the cost for in-house versus going with a contractor, and right now, and versus the reactive?
Okay. So with reactive, we're absorbing it into what our current day looks like.
Okay.
So there's no additional staff, no additional equipment for the power washing system itself. And it's just it's really integrated into the duty day, and we try our best to get to it within 24 to 48 hours. Sometimes, if we get a concern at the end of a week, and it's not something that we have to do an immediate response, that may be the next Monday, or that we would respond to it. Now, from a cost standpoint, if we were to contract out, staff doesn't have a good number on that, because the work that was provided for the $22,000 was a little different than I think what we're looking at now. I think we would want the frequency to be definitely more than once every 3 months, and then we would want to consider potentially all the bus stops, as well as other areas to maybe promenade, other hotspots throughout the city that we know where the sidewalk is a little more stained, if you will, and it's consistently stained. So I think the scope of work would increase. Now, as an estimate, I think staff provide a very rough estimate of maybe $75,000 if that were to be contracted out. But again, that would have to be vetted, and then we would come back with a more accurate number after that process. Now, bringing the work in-house, staff anticipates that would at least be two full-time bodies, two full-time operators, and that value right now is estimated probably about $180,000,
right,
fully loaded for each body. And then with that work, that could be taking on the power washing full-time, which likely wouldn't take the full day, but then the other portion of that day could be involved with other activities.
Yeah, that one I'd like to see if we go to the contract. Right now, being reactive, we hear a lot of, well, this needs to be cleaned. We need more power washing done. And I see that a lot in Facebook posts and like. Contractor sounds to be a very good option. We're going to have to get it done one way or the other. In-house, I can't see spending $360,000 on that. Street sweeping. And I know that I've talked to Mr. Mitchell about this regarding, I know that you guys have talked to them. I think residents, if they knew that street sweeping is on certain days, because I didn't know until I started looking it up. Somehow, some way, we need to get residents to know what day The street sweeper's going to come out and maybe just, if they can, move their cars into a driveway so that they can actually sweep the gutters. Because I know in my cul-de-sac, they can't. They can't get to the gutters because our cul-de-sac is full of parked cars. And so what's the point of paying to have the middle of the cul-de-sac swept out when it's actually the gutters that need to be swept out? I need to be more mindful of that myself. I know that it comes on the third Thursday of every month now, and I need to remember to move my car into the driveway because I have space at that time. So I don't know if that's something that we can do, a social media thing. Chris is really good about putting things together and, maybe making it kind of fun to get residents to move their cars on that day, knowing, without having to put out signs, because that means staff members would have to go out or somebody would have to go out, put up signs, move it. If we don't, could you get a ticket? I don't want to go that route. I just would like to see it more voluntary and see if that would happen. And if we got a little educational campaign going and say, hey, move your car and have cleaner streets, maybe that it would be worth the while. So that's just a commentary, because I do listen for the street sweeper, and but then I never think about moving my car. So I'm just as guilty as everybody else in not moving it. But maybe Chris can come up with something really clever. He's good at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
More questions?
Does our current contract have a liquidated damages for non-performance section? Any idea? Like street sweeping, if they skip a day, if they miss this, do they owe us?
I am not
damages
familiar with any LD clause, liquidated damage clauses within the agreement. No, but staff will double check.
And is that in the new contract? If this is a company that is proven to do that in the past and we're just renewing a contract with them, if we haven't signed the contract, is that something that we should consider putting in that contract? Thank you.
Okay. I think to reconsider the contract now, we're in a better place. Staff believes that we are in a better place. We believe that Sweeping Corps has turned their past practice around, and it has gotten better. They've been more responsive. They're calling for more meetings, and they are aware that we are watching them a little closer. I think to delay it would be concerning a little bit to staff because of the stormwater implications were we to not street sweep throughout the city. But duly noted, and I think staff will definitely keep an eye on the agreement moving forward, and I will pass on just the confirmation of the liquidated damages portion in the agreement.
Thank you, Mike, for the PowerPoint presentation. I like the way it moves. It was a change, so it kept my attention. So let's keep that going. Cool. The MTS ownership option seems too good to be true. So can you just re-clarify that? We designate ownership to MTS, and we don't have to pay to maintain it anymore?
Correct. Yeah, they will take over ownership maintenance, and the city will no longer have to do any of that work with them. Now, their benefit, right, is they have the control now of the actual shelter, so they don't have to worry about working with the city or working with, or potentially the county on being responsive to their ridership for their concerns and comments or concerns that they raise. But it's also an advertising. It's also a revenue generator for MTS. And in part, that's how it's incorporated into the agreement to pay for the service level.
So, I mean, am I missing something with the downside? I mean, I don't see us building 164 bus stop shelters and developing an advertising plan. I mean, maybe we would, but I don't know. Mr. Goebel, you're on the board there. Can you add to some context?
I was going to answer your question during comment time, why I would not go with MTS being a board member, but would you like me to do that now?
I would.
It's a comment.
I yield my time to you for now, yeah.
It's not a cost to the city because we get transit TDA money from the state to help pay for this thing. So each year, MTS gives the city money. In FY22, it was $83,000. This year, it's going to be $138,000. That funds St. Mad's for picking up the trash. That funds the power washing, things like that. So it's kind of cost neutral in terms of that sense. We wouldn't be saving any money. A big key, though, is recently the MTS board approved removing the prohibition on alcohol in advertising. So it may not necessarily have an ad for a tequila, but it would advertise Beer Fest in Little Italy on such and such a day. And I had asked the question, can a community reject ads because they don't fit the character of the community? In other words, do you really want alcohol advertising in a low-income community? And the answer was no, they could not assure that would be prevented. So because we're getting more money from MTS, because alcohol could be on buses going through El Cajon and certainly on the bus shelters, and just the fact that I don't think we need to see more ads along the road, I would personally not go with MTS managing and keep doing what we're doing. We're getting another $50,000 to help with the power washing issue.
Thank you. That adds a lot of context. I appreciate that. So my perspective, generally speaking, is to continue using third-party contractors. To Councilmember Mitchell's point, pension, PERS, CalPERS costs or PERS costs now, benefits. We're just going to get more bang for our buck. Now that we've had that initial meeting with our contractors and they know we're watching them, I would also anticipate, as you're seeing, quality, responsiveness to continue to improve. I know PBID for downtown power washing cleaning uses ECTLC. I'm a little more forgiving because we know the relationship that we have with ECTLC and what they're trying to do. So I'm a little more forgiving with regard to standards. Not to say that we're going to let things slide, but it might take some more monitoring to make sure those standards are there. On the other side of it, with with businesses that are not nonprofits, like WCA or SCA, I'm a little less forgiving because this is their bread and butter. This is what they should be doing. So, all that to say, I would stick with not in-house. I would generally say I'd like to keep our contractors instead of in-house. Thank you.
I prefer keeping everything as contractors. In-house, it costs us a lot more money usually because of PERS, and we already have some problems with PERS. And that power washing, we can always rebid. And I would like to keep the PBID involved with everything. And Councilmember Goebel, boy, certainly threw me into the no, we don't want MTS. I was just, and Michelle was saying, well, this sounds too good to be true, or was it, it was Phil, too good to be true, and go, yeah, well, yeah, something's off, and Steve explained that, so I wouldn't like to have Joe Camel drinking a beer on the side of a bus stop poster, so I don't want to have a partnership with MTS. Can we lose some control there? And that's important. We need to control the look and the ambiance of our city. I don't want you go into some not that great sections of urban California and you see some pretty horrible advertisements. We don't need that in El Cajon. We're trying to make El Cajon a better place.
Sure.
So here's the deal. You've talked to these companies. You've kind of let them know where they stand with us. So I think tagging on with everybody else. Let's keep it as is, but let them know. Hey, we might come back and revisit this in about 6 months. They know what's going on, like the power washing. Just training and get them going. But we're going to come back so that they know that, okay, it's not just a one and done. And we got the new contract. If we do renew the contracts with them, I think they need to know, hey, we're going to revisit this every, I don't know if every 6 months is too much of an ask. But we're going to come back and we're going to follow up and make sure that y'all are doing your job. Is that something that we can do?
Absolutely. And I think that the frequency of the contact is going to vary depending on the contractor.
Sure.
And I think that in instances like Urban Core may not need to be contacted as frequently.
No, they don't.
But I think when the relationship is starting to strengthen, and contact will kind of vary just depending on what the issue is, what the concern,
right.
And how the past performance or recent past performance has been.
Right. And I think, like Mr. Ortiz was saying, giving a pass to ECTLC, kind of being a little more gentle on that. Same thing with the St. Madeline's. Mm-hmm. If I understand that correctly, it's their clients that are doing...
Yes.
Okay. So, again, given their scope of work, and now they know, I think we just need to give them a little bit more grace on that. Thank you.
Okay. Any more comments? Oh.
Mine will be fast. The street sweeping, there was a time when contractors were less expensive because they did not have to pay prevailing wage. Today, with street sweeping, with the prevailing wage, it's almost the same as in-house. I think there is going to come a day on the street sweeping contract when in-house might be better quality service for the same price. I think you're evaluating that going forward. I continue to do that. The bus stop, my opinion on the bus stop. The power washing, I would go reactive on the bus stops. Just whenever it looks dirty, we just react to it and continue with the contractor as mentioned with the P-bid.
More comments? All right. Angela, any speaker cards to this item?
We have no speaker cards.
All right. Mike, thank you very much.
Thank you.
But by the way, nice report. It's a pretty big item today. Okay. I think we've given our feedback. Staff, did you need any more clarification?
No clarification, but I just want to comment on something Mr. Goebel said. We are always analyzing the pros and cons, and Mr. James has done a great job on staying on top of our contractors, and I appreciate his attentiveness to this. And so we hope to see some improvements. But specifically to street sweeping, we are noticing this trend of sort of this monopolistic behavior from our street sweeping company. They're buying up a lot of other street sweeping companies, so there's not a lot of competition. Mr. James made the point that almost every city in the county utilizes this company, so there could be some value at some point. We're analyzing it, but we'll probably be bringing something at some point to the council for some decision points on how to move forward with street sweeping in the future.
Thanks. Okay, so then I'd like to make a motion to accept the report. Second. Please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
All right. There are no commission reports on today's agenda. My activities report is as listed. Deputy Mayor Steve Goebel.
Last week, the MTS contractor TransDev settled its strike with the Teamsters, so the fixed route bus service is back to full service. Today, MTS contractor TransDev reached an agreement with the other union for the paratransit and the minibus services, so all MTS services are back up to speed in the next couple of days. Thank you.
That's great. Councilmember Kendrick. As reported. Councilmember Ortiz. As reported. And Councilmember Mitchell.
As reported.
All right. I'm sorry. There are no joint councilmember reports and no general information items on today's agenda. Item 20 is an introduction of an ordinance to approve amendments to Ordinance 5119. And I'll ask staff to introduce this item, please.
Mayor and Council, pursuant to a new state law that went into effect in 2022, the City Council adopted its military equipment use policy, which is Policy 706, for the use of military equipment by the city's police department. So state law requires that the City Council revisit that policy annually and adopt an ordinance to readopt that 2022 policy. So the agenda item as submitted is that ordinance to readopt the military equipment use policy, and staff recommends that the City Council introduce the ordinance. If the council has questions about the specific military equipment, I would defer that to the police chief. Thank you.
All right, council, any questions or comments? Angela, do we have any speaker cards for this item?
No speaker cards, sir.
All right. I'd like to make a motion to introduce the ordinance. Second. Please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote, and the title of the ordinance is an ordinance reviewing and approving Ordinance 5119 to renew restrictions relating to purchase of military equipment, supplies, or other property for law enforcement use, approving the El Cajon Police Department's annual military equipment report for 2023, and approving Policy 706, Military Equipment Use 2023 edition.
Thank you. There are no second readings of ordinances and no closed sessions on today's agenda. This brings us to adjournment, the adjourned regular joint meeting of the El Cajon City Council, El Cajon Housing Authority, successor agency to the El Cajon Redevelopment Agency, held this 27th day of June 2023, is adjourned until Tuesday, July 11th, 2023 at 3 o'clock p.m.